And I can honestly say he's a very good friend. And I'm really excited to have him here to talk to us about this November 30th talk that he organized many years ago and what it means. And I can tell you that the name doesn't even give you a clue as to what it means. I actually told him to change it to something else because it's quite amazing. And so let me tell you a little bit about Kelvin. He's the executive director and founder of the Turning Within Meditation and Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundations, and is an internationally recognized meditation teacher featured in Business Insider, Newsweek, and Kaiser Health News, and has taught meditation at West Point and in the U.S. Army, including on the DMZ zone in Korea. Kelvin has been meditating for 50 years, has taught meditation for 49 years to thousands of people in over 60 countries, including me and quite a few people here. He has graduated from Dartmouth, Yale, and Boston College Law, and has lived in 7 countries. Kelvin also has spoken at several Lions conferences and written 2 amazing books, one of which is here. The other one I just lent to a friend and forgot to get it back. Overcoming the Fear of Death, and my favorite, Marcus Aurelius. Also, Laura Live, you can put information for the website, november30th.com, and then the introductions. I hope that you will all check it out because it's quite a bit of fascinating information. So Kelvin, why don't you come on and tell, maybe briefly, tell about yourself for the few people that don't know. And by the way, and Kelvin's an NDEr, but he's not going to really talk about that. So just how you are, how you came to meditation, and how you met all these people, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So just the short version of who I am. So I've been, as Shaun said, I've been teaching meditation for many, many years, almost 50 years now. I've been meditating for 52 years. I learned when I was a teenager. I was very, very stressed out. So I've spoken at IONS, at the last physical face-to-face conference in 2019. So those of you, maybe some of you may have heard me speak there, met me there, and so forth. You know that from my story, that I did not get into spiritual stuff right away. I got into meditation because I was very stressed out. Later, I started spontaneously having past life memories. In the mid-1970s, and in the mid-1980s, I started spontaneously communicating with the other side. As Shaun said, I had a near-death experience when I almost drowned about 2 years after I had learned to meditate. So that's kind of a summary of my background, and I've had a corporate and legal career and so forth, raising a family and et cetera. But now I'm doing this work again that I did in the 1970s full-time. I'm doing it again now full-time for the last 10 years or so through my nonprofits. So that's kind of summary of who I am. I teach worldwide. I'm in 60 countries, mostly teaching on Zoom like this now. And many of you have heard some of my YouTube videos, or maybe even taken some of my classes. Yeah.
And you learned from Maharishi, that you're going to be talking about later, right?
Yeah. So just a quick summary statement of that, about how Maharishi fits into my personal life, and then Shaun will draw out of me how it fits in with this whole 30th November talk. Yeah, I studied first with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. I learned TM, Transcendental Meditation, as taught by him and his organization in 1970 when I learned, and I studied personally with him in 1971, and again in 1973. I was an international leader in his organization, teaching. I taught about 1,000 people TM before that the organization went off in a different direction, got into other things besides meditation, and that's when I left the organization. But I still have very strong positive feelings about Maharishi himself personally and his teaching and so forth. I've made the technique easier, and I've removed all the any cultural trappings from the teaching completely, and then made it much more flexible and easier as I teach it now, called Turning Within Meditation.
Yes, you got rid of all the fluff.
Yeah, all the unnecessary. You don't have to hold your fingers this way. You don't have to sit. You don't have to burn a certain kind of sandalwood incense bought from a certain part of India and all this kind of stuff. It's like, you can buy that stuff. It's okay. But you don't have to do all that stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah, you make up much easier for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we start with what the 30th of November talk was?
Yeah.
How you got involved and where the information came from.
Sure. So the talk happened in 2014. So it's coming up on the 8th year anniversary of the 30th November talk that obviously occurred on 30th November 2014. I helped organize, I was the main organizer of the event. It occurred, geographically occurred in Alexandria, Virginia, at the George Washington Memorial Masonic Temple, which is the main national temple of the Masons, evidently, we held it there for, the main reason was because it was available at that time under fairly short notice, and it was within our budget. I don't know, people, you start doing event planning, you start to realize that there's some extremely expensive venues out there. And this was reasonably priced and it was available. It was held right there on the other side of the Potomac River from Washington, D.C., as I said. The topic of the discussion was the history of spirituality in the Judeo-Christian-Islamic and Vedic traditions, 4 major traditions on planet Earth over the last 7,000 to 10,000 years. So that alone is a mindful, never mind a mouthful, right? Judeo-Christian-Islamic-Vedic. So for those of you who don't know, everybody I'm sure recognizes Judeo, Jewish, Christian, Islamic. Vedic includes also not just Hinduism, but also Buddhism comes out of the Vedic tradition. So those major spiritual traditions on planet Earth, what happened was my friend George Hammond, who gave the actual 30th November talk, which I encourage you to go watch at the 30thnovember.com website. He got a download, and we'll talk about who he got the download from, but he got a download from we'll call them the main source people of creators of the Judeo-Christian-Islamic-Vedic traditions. Some of the key people, some of the key players who actually brought about what we now know, what we now call those 4 major traditions, right? So George, what happened, well, first of all, George and I met at Dartmouth College. We were undergraduates there. He's a couple of years younger than I am, but we taught meditation in Maharishi's organization. So it's material, that little tidbit, factoid, is material to the story that we're unfolding here about what the 30th November talk is, and who the players were involved in terms of sharing with a number of us the information that George shared at the 30th November 2014 lecture. So George was also a leader in that organization, taught TM, Transcendental Meditation, knew Maharishi as well. In this lifetime, in the 20th century lifetime, known as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Those of you who don't know who he was, if you're pulling a blank on his name, but you recognize it, but you're quite sure from what, the Beatles learned meditation from Maharishi, and that really catapulted the TM organization throughout the world. So that may be a missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle in your memory you may be trying to remember. George, what happened was George's sister died tragically in his house in San Francisco. She had had a heart operation, and I can say these things very, very, I know we have a receptive audience to these ideas of communications from the other side in this audience. She came to him soon after she died, as in within 2 or 3 hours after she died, in his house, and came to him and started talking to him about how she wanted her funeral done in a certain traditional way that he was unfamiliar with. She gave him information, call this person, call that person. And so he talks about this in the 30th November talk. In the introduction, at the beginning of the talk, he gives you a little background about this. But that's what happened. That's where he got started. She brought and introduced into the scene that he was seeing some of his old teachers. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who had died in 2008. Remember, his sister died in the house in 2014. So this is about 6 years later. After Maharishi died, she brings him into the scene with George and herself, now on the other side. And then Maharishi starts talking to him, and then brings Jesus, another one of George's old teachers from 2,000 years ago. Jesus, as in Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus brought him into the scene. And the three of them had a conversation along with some other members of this group, and for about 90 minutes. And George was looking at his clock next to his nightstand, and he kind of was timing this. It went on for 90 Earth minutes, this conversation amongst several of them. So who else was in this group in addition to Maharishi and Jesus? By the way, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in a previous lifetime was John the Baptist. So those of you who are Christian, you know anything about the Bible, John the Baptist is a major player in the Bible in the run-up to passing the baton, you could say, to Jesus in what we now refer to as the Jesus Project. We can come back and revisit that about why Jesus came to planet Earth and so forth and so on as we continue this discussion with Shaun. But just quickly, the other members of the group were Maharishi's teacher, who he refers to as Guru Dev. So if those of you who have watched or will watch this 30th November talk that George gave, let me just explain a couple of key points of terminology. He talks about this person as Guru Dev. Those of you who already meditate, and maybe you've meditated, learned meditation through some other one of these Indian gurus, you may have heard this term, your own guru calling his teacher Guru Dev, because Guru Dev just means exalted teacher, great teacher, something like that, okay? It's an honorific term, it's a term of respect to one's teacher. But when George is using it in the 30th November talk, you're going to understand that he's talking on behalf of Maharishi in a lot of the lecture of ideas that Maharishi asked to be shared with all of us here on planet Earth now. So he's using Guru Dev the way Maharishi used the term Guru Dev, and he's referring to his teacher, Maharishi's teacher, whose name was Swami Brahmananda Saraswati. So you can see that that's a mouthful to say that over and over again. It's much easier for George to just call him Guru Dev. But Guru Dev is an honorific term, but he's using it specifically to identify that particular personality. Other key members of the group who gave him this download about the history of spirituality on planet Earth over the last 7,000 to 10,000 years was Shankara. Shankara, those of you who know anything about the Vedic tradition, Shankara was also Vyasa in a previous lifetime. Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita is in the Mahabharata. So you may or may not have heard of the Mahabharata, but a lot of people in the West have heard of the Gita, G-I-T-A, the Bhagavad Gita. So Shankara, in a previous lifetime, was Vyasa, wrote those. Those are, we could call them seminal documents or considered scriptures in Vedic and Hindu religion, in those traditions, as part of the teachings and so forth. So he was one of those key players. Another key player whose name you may recognize was Jehovah. Jehovah was a key player, obviously, in this whole project we're calling the Jehovah Project, that we'll get into as we unfold this more in discussion with Shaun here. But Jehovah, some of you may know Jehovah as God. Some people view Jehovah as God, capital G God, although Jehovah does not view himself that way, or Yahweh or Allah are other names for that people may know the personality known as Jehovah. So all of those personalities came and were involved in this 90-minute initial download to George Hammond of why certain things were done over the last 7,000 to 10,000 years. That's kind of overview, quick. We can get into details.
Yeah, and before you go, so what I want to back up to, you started meditating, and just really quick, your first experience of a past life, and then how you connected to all these people, because you had a science mind. You're highly educated. You were not into all this fluff and stuff. You became a meditator to control your anxiety.
Yes.
So, and then after you start meditating and with these people, what starts happening to you?
Yeah. So what happened, like you said, I was not a, let's just say it would be very direct. I did not believe in reincarnation. When I would go to these TM teacher courses and whatever, retreats, etc., I'd hear people talking about it, and I would go, okay, yeah, and I'd walk the other way. I was polite. I didn't get in people's face about it, but I thought, yeah, okay, what, imagination. And then what happened was, the short version of the story is that I had a dream, and I had a very, very upsetting dream, and I did not know the dream had anything to do with anything other than it was an upsetting dream, until about 6 or 7 months later. This really upsetting dream, like more upset than I'd ever been before. And it was a very clear dream. So for my whole life, I've had very lucid, very clear, colorful dreaming, and I remember them and so forth and so on. They're very real life, my dreams. And so about 6 months later, I was on one of these, remember, this was in the 1970s, so this was now 1977, in November 1977. I was on one of these 2-month-long meditate every day, all day TM courses with a bunch of TM teachers. And in our hotel, there were maybe 60 or 70 guys. They segregated the men and the women for obvious reasons. And so all the men were in there, and we were sitting on foam mattresses, meditating, doing group meditations in addition to meditating in our rooms for hours on end. While during one of those group meditations, while we are doing energy, we'll call them, some of the viewers here may think of it as Kundalini kind of energy moving exercises. We were doing that, and then what happened was, if you saw some of the other guys in the room sitting cross-legged, they would hop around. They look like frogs, like hopping around because they're getting energy rushes up their spine and through their body and stuff. Well, that didn't happen to me. What happened to me was I flipped over on my back, and my feet are up in the air, like doing a yoga, like a shoulder stand, except I was more in like what they call it, the plow position. I think it's called the plow position in yoga. My feet are all the way back almost, and I'm lying on my back, and my arms are out like this, and I'm reliving a crucifixion experience. So I'm being crucified upside down, and so on one of the afternoon walks I did, we always went for a walk, and we call them walk and talks. Go for a walk, get some exercise. Doing yoga in between your meditations all day isn't enough. So let's get out and get some physical. It was exercise. So we would walk around the Swiss Alps there. We were over in Switzerland, in Wilderswil, outside of Interlaken. It was gorgeous. And I was with my friend George Hammond, who, as I already told you, gave this 30th November talk. And George had told me about some past life stuff. I thought he was imagining it. He like for a couple of years before this, I said, yeah, George, okay, great. What are we eating for the lunch? So we were out for one of our walks, and I started to tell him about this dream that I'd had 6 or 7 or 8 months earlier, and I just told him the beginning of the dream. Basically, I told him, I was just really upset. And then he finished the dream. He told me what I was wearing, that I was in the side of the ditch on the side of the road. I had all this dirt in my mouth, and I was crying all night. And I said, how did you know that? And he says, because I found you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I found you 2,000 years ago. I'm the one who found you in the ditch that night, or that morning, the next morning. And so he said, you don't know who you are, right? And I said, no. I said, well, he said, well, you've been talking about being crucified upside down. You know who was crucified upside down? So I did not know that. So that's when he started opening up my memories. So that's how that, so it turns out that I was involved with Jesus and so forth 2,000 years ago. And then my floodgates opened, and I started having all these memories, Shaun, right?
Right.
I have a connection to the 30th November group, but I didn't know who they all were until I started getting more of this download after George got his initial download.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. First thing I want to get clear also is that these are many teachers, right? This is just this group.
Yeah. There are many teachers. Look, there's about 15 or 20 teachers in this core group that they refer to themselves as the movement. Why do they call themselves the movement? They're all on the other side now. Maharishi was the one most recently incarnated in 20th century Earth, 21st century, but he died, as I said, in 2008. They call themselves the movement because they thought, how can we help humanity move forward in a positive direction? Because they looked down, 7,000 to 10,000 years ago, whatever. Look at all this killings going on, the sacrificing of women and children, and all this killing and wars, and everybody just killing each other for millions of years. This has been going on, and now what can we do about this? So it's kind of like they had, this is my terminology, that they looked at it kind of like a social science experiment. Like, how can we help move things forward in a more positive direction? That was the intent behind all this. But yes, to answer your question, there are 15 to 20 core people. There have been as many as, we're not sure, 40 or 50 or 60 as part of the group. I come and go. I'm not a core member of the group. I've been off doing my own thing. So is George. But there is a core group. And then there are other teachers who are joining in it, in a sense, the thinking. This is not a, let me make this real clear. I want to say this very, very clearly. This is not an organization kind of thing. This is not it's not going to turn into a religious organization, God forbid. This is a teaching. This is a loose-knit group of teachers, of spiritual teachers, who've coalesced, well, as I said, around 7,000 to 10,000 years ago. And there are others who are joining the thinking as this has gotten rolled out over the last 8 Earth years. Does that answer your question, I think?
Yeah, and you want to explain who the holy tradition is real quick?
Yeah, so this term, this holy tradition idea that George uses. So for those of you who have not watched this is an important clarification point, I guess I would say. Because we in the West, because I grew up Protestant, I didn't pay attention, I was a terrible Sunday school student, but I grew up Protestant, Congregational Church and so forth, Christian. When we hear the word holy, we tend to think of divinity or God or God-like or something, related to the Holy Trinity or something. The way that in the Eastern traditions they use the word holy tradition, they think of it more as a way of giving respect and honoring and respect to, gratitude to the tradition of teachers that have come before you. So that's the holy tradition. When you hear George use that phrase, that's what he's talking to, the lineage of teachers that came before you that have passed down knowledge and teaching and technique, etc. So that's what that phrase refers to. And there's a long lineage. And the holy tradition he's generally referring to in the 30th November talk is the Vedic holy tradition, sometimes referred to as the Shankara or Shankaracharya tradition. All right. So Shankara being a great sage in the Vedic tradition. All right. So that's that lineage. But there are many lineages out there. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the Resurrection of Jesus project first, and how that would relate to a lot of people here, NDErs, and you teach a lot of people to overcome the fear of death.
Yeah.
So maybe talk about that.
One of the concepts that George covers a lot of ground in here. Before I get into the Jesus project, let me just lay the kind of the landscape of what he talks about just loosely, because there's so many topics that he covers. The first thing that he gets into after he explains what it was like holding Jesus and John the Baptist's hands and what it physically felt like holding their light bodies in his physical biological body. After he gets into the introductory stuff about where he got the information from and how that happened and so forth, Jehovah wanted him to give a kind of an overview of the prophetic approach and where that came from. It came from Jehovah's perception and assessment that what was being the seeds of knowledge that were being planted in humanity over several millennia may have been leading to unintended consequences. So understand that this whole group of this movement group that I just outlined to you is working out of what we now call India. 7 to 10,000 years ago, there were no countries, obviously, right? But from the Himalayas and that peninsula that we know, that country we know as India, that area of the world. So they're sending, at that point, they were sending what we would call prophets down. They were sending sages, gurus, prophets down with messages and saying, hey, stop killing these people. And that's where the karma idea came from, okay? So this is one of the ideas that's described briefly in this 30th November talk. Where's the genesis? Where did the idea of karma come from? And then how did it get distorted? We can talk about that in a future session, but this session is not to give you the 30th November talk. This is to just give you an overview of topics covered, and then you can go watch it yourself. But karma, where did that come from? Consequences. You kill somebody, there's consequences to these actions. So, let's send somebody down to humanity, start teaching this idea. Dharma. These people are humanity just sitting around killing each other and not doing much of anything productive. Let's create this idea of duty, and you have a role, a position in society, maybe a life purpose. And then, okay, your role is to do this and this and this. Send somebody down and teach that idea. Okay, that's where this started going. But then in that sector of the geography of Earth, okay, Jehovah sees this, and remember, they're all seeing what's going on. They're observing this. This is like, as I said, my terminology, it's like a social science experiment. Try this out, see what the result is. Jehovah sees this, and without telling the others, he starts thinking, you know what, this karma and dharma idea are starting to create suffering after several thousands of years in people. So those of you who know anything about karma, you may have heard this idea that this notion that there's some big accounting system in the sky, in heaven or in the universe, that's keeping track of all your good and bad deeds. It's like a massive inanimate Santa Claus who keeps track of who's naughty and who's nice. And that's not the case, but that's what evolved over time, because humans started throwing in these ideas. Why? To help to create religious institutions that then can control people. All right. That's the bottom line summary statement on that. Well, they didn't intend this that way, and Jehovah started seeing this as an unintended consequence. And he didn't say anything to the rest of his colleagues on the other side, but he said, you know what? I'm going to do an experiment over in what you and I now call the Middle East, Mesopotamia area, and the Tigris and Euphrates, river area, and so forth, and then Judea, et cetera, eventually. But initially, in that part of the world, he said, I'm going to do an experiment over there. And that's when he started what we call the Jehovah Project, sending prophets down. Those of you may recognize the name Isaiah from the Old Testament, and other prophets in the Old Testament were part of the Jehovah plan. To your question, Shaun, later, he changed from the prophetic approach, which George describes in some detail in the talk, what Jehovah's intentions were and so forth. And he gets into Abraham and that story a little bit in his talk. But Jehovah evolved his plans to then create what we call the Jesus Project. And that was sending John the Baptist down first to plow the field for Jesus, and then Jesus would work together with John the Baptist. This was the soul plan. Those, many of you have heard, I'm sure you heard the phrase soul plans. So it was Jehovah's plan with a number of us. We created this plan together and come down, and I was part of that plan. Now, I had met members of the group 4,000 years ago when I was an Egyptian priest. That's when I first got introduced to them, but I was doing other things in between and so forth. But I became more closely involved with this group in the Jesus Project. So I had a significant role, let's say, in that project. What was the point? The point was to help reduce suffering, overcome the fear of death, reduce fears and anxieties in people so they could live more now in the present. That's it in a nutshell. There were other takeaways from that, or objectives from that, but that was the major one that we were hoping would be a takeaway from that.
And what is the crucifixion according to this? What is the meaning of it?
The meaning, there is no meaning to the crucifixion other than the meaning you could say is that people's free will desires got involved in that were out of anybody's control, because nobody can control other people's free will choices, right? And so Jesus was crucified not to save everybody from their sins. That is a Paul created that. Remember, Paul never met Jesus, was never in his physical presence, never learned any of his Paul learned his teachings from us. We shared Jesus' teachings with Paul. Paul came on the scene 3.5 years after Jesus died, after Jesus was murdered. Jesus was murdered. I mean, I don't pull punches when I say this, and it upsets me that he was murdered, but it upset the whole Jesus project. This is a soul plan that Jehovah created along with many of us, and it was the apple cart was completely overturned because of the jealousy and the fears of a bunch of priests at the time, and Pontius Pilate's desire to not have a bunch of dust-ups going on in Judea. He didn't want to riot, in other words, in Judea, and he didn't want to upset people in Rome because he hated being there in the first place. He wanted to get reposted. Well, the last thing he wants is a lot of brouhaha in the territory he's governing. So he just said to the priests, "You do with whatever you want with this guy Jesus. He doesn't seem like a bad guy to me," and he was crucified. So it was a horrific thing. Paul created the whole notion that Jesus died on the cross for people's sins. That is one thing that really upsets Jesus, and it really upsets Jehovah, because the whole notion that the love that was real between Jehovah, that is real, still is real, between the personalities known as Jehovah and Jesus, as if they're father and son, not literally biological, obviously, but Jesus had a mother and father biologically, but as if father and son, that really bothers those two personalities, that people still think that Paul promoted that. And the whole idea that all you had to do was believe in that notion that Paul created got a lot of people's attention, because all it required was faith. It didn't require people to do anything, so a lot of the early Christians were criminals and the destitute, who were really down and out. And I feel for them, but understandably, if somebody just says, "You're going to go to the head of the line and go to this place called heaven, and you're going to skip to the head of the line, and all you have to do is believe that this guy died on the cross for your sins," lots of people are going to sign up for that. The other thing that people don't realize is that Paul was an end of the earth believer. Paul was preaching, and this is all religious historian backed up by facts, by documents written by Paul in Greek. So if you research any of this, the religious historians all know and agree that Paul was an end of the earth believer. He thought that he was preaching that the end of the earth was going to happen in 6 weeks, and all you needed to do was believe this whole notion of this guy Jesus dying on your cross for your sins, and you're going to get to the head of the line. He was telling people not to buy property and not to get married. That was two things that he was teaching people, or preaching to people, because he said in 6 weeks the earth is going to end. There's going to be no earth, and you're going to be either in heaven or you're not going to make it. So that was Paul's message, okay? That became what we now know the seeds of. He didn't create all of the belief systems we now know as Christianity, but he started the Paulist seeds of that, we'll call them.
And so we should probably back up. And who exactly is Jehovah?
So,
is he a god? How is he different?
Jehovah views himself as you and I do. We are personalities. So Jehovah views himself more like you and I than many of us have viewed him as capital G God. He doesn't view himself as a god or the god. As far as Jesus, Jehovah, Shankara, there's a number of Buddhist teachers who are part of this group now, etc., Yogananda and others. nobody knows who, if there, nobody knows if there is a God. Nobody has ever met a capital G God. So no, Jehovah does not view himself that way. Although for those of you who still want to view him that way, he's not telling people to change their beliefs. Just like I say at the beginning of all my lectures, and I should say this right now, this is not about changing people's beliefs. This is about an explanation from the people, from the personalities, we'll call them, who were the seed planters of many of these ideas that later became the Judeo-Christian, Islamic, and Vedic traditions. And to clarify, in order to what? Why? To reduce suffering on planet Earth. That's always been their intent, and that's the intent of the 30th November talk.
Yeah, and so at this point, I want to talk about when you and I were in class and Jehovah, and you were, because Jehovah he feels differently now than he did then, right? And he was the God of the Bible.
Right. In the Bible, we'll say let's say it this way. Jehovah never said he was God. Other people said he was God. Okay? So no, Jehovah has never called himself God. And if you've read that he says he was, the personality denies that. Okay? It's like whatever somebody hearsay wrote in the Bible, he denies that. People got to understand the Bible is written down verbal stories that have been told over many thousands of years. So you got the Old Testament over many thousands of years, you got the New Testament over thousands of years, and the New Testament alone was written as 50 to 125 years after Jesus died. So you have these multiple layers of what we call in the law, we call it hearsay. Here, for those of you who don't know what hearsay is, that's when somebody told Shaun that I said this, but then Shaun told somebody else, and that person told somebody else, and that person who's six levels or 10, 20 levels down the chain is now writing the Bible. Okay, so that's pretty much what happened in real life, because the other thing you got to realize is anywhere from 85 to 99% of the population then was illiterate. So most of the people are telling stories to telling stories to telling stories to telling stories. It's like the kindergarten game. You're sitting around 25 of you and tell one story, and you see what it's like when people are supposed to tell the same story, and what's it like when it gets back to you. It's like that. So a lot of the Bible stories, especially if you see stuff about Jehovah calling himself God, he denies that. He's never called himself God, but people have viewed him as God. And here's the point, I think you may be implying, Shaun, is that he allowed that to happen for those thousands of years because it kind of suited people listening to his advice. He's now viewing it very differently. And he views, and so one of the main takeaways out of the 30th November talk, the going forwards, again, this is not, it's only, George only talks about the history in order to set the stage. Really, it's about the going forward ideas of what are they teaching now? And going forward, it's about not master-disciple, not guru relationship, not divinity, because Jehovah is he's been very explicit and adamant, and we'll say enthusiastic is a understatement, but very enthusiastic, very, very enthusiastic about us, about me and others, getting the idea across to people that blindly following him as capital G God, or any personality, whether it's an angel, a medium who says they're talking to so-and-so angel, or whether it's a preacher on this side or a priest, anybody viewing anybody as an absolute authority and to blindly follow them on anything is not advised, is not encouraged by Jehovah or anybody in this movement group anymore. It's explicit now, because they now realize, especially Jehovah feels badly about this, and I can say that this in this way, he wants us to know that he feels badly about his allowing people to view him in that way and not saying anything about it. Again, how people view him, that's their choice and so forth. He understands and he loves them regardless, okay? He's a very loving being. But he understands now that it's important for him and others to point out that that blind following leads to a devotion that can be very detrimental to the individual, because then the individual becomes devoted to other beings who may not be as so kind and loving as Jehovah. And then they makes them more open to being enslaved and abused. And now he sees that he has that clarity of thinking, because he's seen that happen so many times over the thousands of years. Maharishi inspired Jehovah. Maharishi and Shankara inspired Jehovah and the other members of the movement to come out and be forthright and share, pull the curtain back and share these ideas and thoughts with us 8 years ago.
Yeah, and I never knew who Jehovah was. I, obviously heard the name, and I was in a class with Kelvin that he was teaching, and Kelvin was sharing this information, and all of a sudden I started hearing this voice in my head telling me to tell Kelvin things that Kelvin wasn't saying, that Jehovah, it turns out, because I had no idea at the time, what he wanted him to say. And it's quite interesting because we have Kelvin noticed it on the video, because I wasn't sure at first who was telling me to get you to clarify. So it was quite interesting.
Yeah, that experience or similar variations thereof happened a lot in the run-up to the 30th November talk, so the timeline was George's sister Mary died in his house in January. Obviously, November is whatever, 10 or 11 months later. So when we were organizing this, over that period of time, I got contacted by 20 people around the world, Australia, Germany, England, all over the place, United States, Canada. I did not know, who said, like one guy told me, he said he woke up at 3 in the morning and his room was floodlit. He lives alone. And there was a being of light there telling him that he should go and listen to this 30 November talk because there was stuff there that he should learn about, et cetera, et cetera. So this happened to 20 people who I didn't even know. They found me through the network on Facebook or whatever, and they told me this stuff. So I don't know how many hundreds of people had visitations like that, where members of the movement were kind of poking their head into people's and whispering to them, kind of like you got to whisper to in that session with us.
Right, multiple people. So it's not just one person hearing.
Oh, dozens, 2 dozen that I know about. I don't know how many others I never heard. They never contacted me.
Yeah, and so while we're on this, because you mentioned him a while ago, Yogananda, I and several people, are followers of Yogananda. And what does he think about this? How's he included in this?
Yeah. So
what's your experience?
I had this really unusual experience. I was telling you the other day, earlier. I was in Austin, Texas, and I had a tooth issue, and I had to have a tooth pulled. I had a root canal and this and that, whatever, crown and whatever. I'd already been through all the other stages. I had to get the tooth pulled in, and I had to get an implant put in. Well, I was sitting there waiting for the Novocaine or whatever. He gives you the needle, and the oral surgeon leaves and his assistant leaves, and they leave you for 10 minutes or whatever. So I figured, you guys know I meditate, I teach meditation. If I got a few minutes, I'm sitting alone in a room, I was gonna close my eyes. So I closed my eyes and I just letting myself meditate. I'm in that state, I've been meditating for 50 years now, over 50 years. So I just closed my eyes and boom. And so Yogananda pops in and he's time to talk to me. He starts talking to me about, yeah, this 30th November thing is actually good. I'm on board with this. And he starts telling me this stuff. And he asked me to talk to this other friend of mine. I didn't know you were part of it. I would have contacted you if I knew this back then. This was, I think it happened in 2016 or 2017, Shaun. This was before you and I met. And, but he knew that I knew this other guy, SRF guy. And he said, tell him to contact the group and wherever it is in Southern California, wherever the headquarters is, and tell them that if they want to put something out that, and let people know about this. So maybe that happened in 2014, actually, because it was like in the run up. So he's like, tell them about this and blah, 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 whatever. So while the doctor, he's talking to Yogananda, is like talking to me, and then and then the oral surgeon and assistant come in and say, "Okay, Mr. Chin, how's it going?" Yogananda's still in my ear talking, okay, like this mental telepathy thing's going on. And they say, "Oh, Mr. Chin, how's it? Okay, how's that? Like, is it numb? Is it numb yet?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's good." So he starts yanking on my teeth. He's got like the equivalent of a pair of pliers. Is like, I never, they never show you what they're doing. But he's yanking on my tooth to pull my tooth out now. And Yogananda's finishing the request to me. And then in my other ear comes this group, and I don't know who they are. I knew it was Yogananda because he identified himself. But this other group is like there's 3 or 4 of them. They're joking with me about, this is why, we're not incarnating anytime soon, because they're joking with me about getting my tooth pulled. So it was like a great distraction, actually. So that I was paying attention to them joking with me. But anyway, yeah. So Yogananda's seemed, according to
I just want to point that out to everybody that my sister have had many experiences with Yogananda. Many people have seen or experienced him talking to them at least. And also the side note that this is one of the many benefits of meditating. And as most people here know, after-death communication is real. We can all do it. We can all talk to Yogananda. So I just wanted to put that little side note in there.
That goes for Jesus, Jehovah, Shankara, Vyasa, any of these, John the Baptist, etc. So yeah, exactly. Ditto that. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the messages, and I might be overstepping, but do you think like Guru Dev, would he agree with the term "be your own guru"? I mean, isn't that what they're trying to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, Guru Dev, who was Maharishi's teacher, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati was his actual name. Yeah, he's 100% on board with this. Yeah, 100% on board.
No more following yogis and stuff. Follow your own.
Follow yourself. And so, in fact, he visited Swami Brahmananda Saraswati. So he's obviously died in 1953. He's on the other side, right? He was a Shankaracharya of the northern seat. So Shankara is a person. He's part of the movement. Charya means seat or chair in Sanskrit. So the northern seat, Shankaracharya of the north, there's a Shankaracharya of the south, there's one in the east and west in India. Okay, there's 4 major seats, honorific seats, and they kind of oversee the spirituality of those regions. Okay, that's all you need to know about that. Swami Brahmananda Saraswati was appointed Shankaracharya of the north when he was alive in the 30s, 40s, and he died in 1953. He went and visited the Shankaracharyas from the other side and told them that he wanted to disband the whole Shankaracharya thing, right? The other interesting message is that the Dalai Lama, who's still alive today, George was given a message to give to the Dalai Lama about disbanding the whole notion of the Dalai Lama. Didn't need to have because that's a whole guru thing too, right? Those people who don't know. Well, George actually went, and George is going to write a book in the next year or two about all the run-up and all the conversations, all the side conversations that all of us had, that he had, so forth, because he didn't just get this 90-minute download. It continued for another 10 or 11 months. And then some of us were getting information and we're sharing with George, and it's made its way into the 30th November event, etc. But George tried to get information to the Dalai Lama, a message from the movement, specific dictated message to the Dalai Lama about disbanding the whole Dalai Lama idea and so forth, and why, etc. We later found out, if you go on the website, the Dalai Lama must have gotten whispered to directly. Finally, he heard them, and he's the last Dalai Lama. It's on their website. A lot of people don't know that. So he's disbanding it because he's been the Dalai Lama for a gajillion years, right? The same person keeps coming back, reincarnated. So, yeah. Short answer to your question: yes, yes, and yes. You're muted now, Shaun.
We are supposed to question everything. And
Yes,
with this, what we're doing now, and with the 30th of November talk, just so people are clear, question everything, what resonates
absolutely.
with you. And that's the big message that these guys are trying to
The
give.
big message is resonate. What resonates, you take. What doesn't resonate, you don't take. And that includes everything that I'm saying. That includes everything that George says. He says it at the beginning of the talk. You got to remember that. And he reminds people every once in a while. But that's a given, and that's true from all my teaching. And it's the way I've been teaching for, I was going to say thousands of years, but decades this lifetime, but thousands of years. That's the way I've been teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did mention earlier that hopefully to everybody, that Kelvin has an amazing class about the afterlife, and he teaches people to not be afraid of death, and then of course the meditation. So
Right.
he really knows a lot. So I encourage you guys to check out one of his classes. Okay, so
I know you have a list of questions there.
yeah, I'm kind of what so we talked about some of them, but what are the main takeaways
Yeah.
of the
So I would sum up the main takeaways as this. So first, it's overcoming the fear of death, any fears related to death and dying. That's number one, because that's a continuation of the Jesus Project, the John the Baptist and Jesus Project, because that was a main thing. And then of course Jesus died and was crucified, he was murdered, but he came back. He knew it was going to happen. He could see things were going south. So he intentionally used it as a teaching model. Now, many of you, I'll come back to your question in a sec. Let me just say this before I forget. Many of you may have been there 2,000 years ago, and some of you may have witnessed the horrific crucifixion of Jesus, and many of you may have been his students, and many of you may have been some of his teachers. So if any of you, I'm getting a little emotional saying this even, and if any of you are getting any emotion, feeling emotionally upset about anything that I'm saying, or if you've ever seen Jesus Christ Superstar or a movie about Jesus being crucified or whatever, and you get really, really unusually upset, there's a strong, high probability that you were there, or that you were part of the group that was there and that then was talking about being with him, etc. So, and I say that to you so that you can acknowledge that, but also so that you can move through that, and that incredibly, for some people, intense grieving experience. I can help you with that. And there are those of us, not just me, but others who were there, who can help you with that, because it has scarred so many people. And there were thousands of us who were with him then when he was alive, just those short 3 or 4 years when he was teaching before he got murdered. So keep that in mind. So we are picking up where he left off. We're continuing the overcoming the fear of death teachings and so forth. You know, that's one of my foundations that I started about 8 years ago. That's one of the major things, overcoming the fear of death, and then turning within, seeking the kingdom of heaven within was Jesus's way of describing meditation. He didn't call it meditation, we called it prayer, but seeking the kingdom of heaven within was his terminology. And I call it turning within. That's the 21st century version of it. Now, I don't say this in my meditation classes, but somebody asked me today on a call with them, and they said, he or she asked me, do I teach people how to pray? And I say, yeah, I teach people how to pray. That's what I'm teaching. I don't say that publicly because I don't want to make it sound like I'm teaching from a religious standpoint, but prayer to me is connecting with oneself and in that great universe outside of ourselves and all the beings in the universe, whether we see them or don't see them. To me, that's what prayer is to me. Now, I understand that to many people, prayer may be I want to win the Super Bowl. I'm praying to God or gods or whoever, whatever, or praying to St. Francis to help me find my lost car keys or something. George makes a joke about that in the 30th November talk. But I'm thinking about prayer in a different way. So turning within, that's what Jesus he called seeking the kingdom of heaven within. That's another takeaway. Another major takeaway is transcending cruelty. The idea of that the importance of being important is a foundational principle that we see all the time in the world, where people who are feeling weak want to feel more important. And how do they do that? They bully people around them to depress them, to make themselves feel more important. And then they feel more confident because they've depressed and bullied other people and berated people around them. Okay. They've enslaved, they've abused people around them, they feel better. That's a summary statement of cruelty. And so how do we transcend that? That was a teaching that George did not have much time to talk about because he ran out of time. You'll see. He thought it was going to be 2-hour talk and he went over and he went 3 hours. He couldn't see me waving at him. We had 5 cameras and the lights were so bright. He couldn't see the camera manager of the camera team waving at him because the lights were so bright. And he finally looks at his watch and goes, oh my, it's like 3 hours. So he just touched on this transcending cruelty idea, which I am teaching more about. You can go on my YouTube channel. You can see videos of me talking about that. And then the last major idea, and there are many other ideas, the whole karma dharma thing, is another idea, but that was clarified. The whole idea of enlightenment and merging with God or the universe or the absolute, that was clarified out of this and so forth. We can talk more about that when I do my 8th year anniversary, 30th November talk Q&A in a couple of weeks, or is it a week from now? Anyway, but the other major idea is friendship. Friendship, viewing all of others as friendship, promoting the idea of friendship on this side and the other side, and diminishing this idea of guru, master disciple, or divinity relationship. Worshiping, the idea of worshiping God or gods plural if you're pantheistic, or if you or worshiping archangels. The whole idea of levels and layers, debunking that and not encouraging that. So they are explicitly discouraging the whole notion that there are layers in heaven, that there are layers to states of consciousness. All of this is being encouraged to be clarified as we are all in this together, figuring things out for eternity. That's what it seems like. And we're all learning more and more about ourselves and each other for eternity. And therefore, we should all help each other in a friendly way and not in a competitive, my state of consciousness is better than your state of consciousness mentality. Or I'm in this layer in heaven and you're this lower layer heaven and I'm better than you. This competitive view that some angels are still promoting, quite frankly, on the other side. They want to reduce and hopefully eventually eliminate the power of this emotional draw to people that I'm so important. No, that we are all equally important, and that by helping each other in this more friendship-related relationship, we all benefit from it 10 times more than if we put somebody down and make them feel weaker and we feel great.
So we're all teachers, we're all students, we're all therapists, we're all client patients.
Yes, yes. And are there some teachers we can seek out who may be more helpful for us at different times? Yes. It's not to say that there aren't guides and coaches and teachers and however we want to call them to help us, whether it's spiritually or otherwise, but not worshiping them blindly. It's the blind devotion. It's the bhakti view, if you know that Vedic term, that bhakti devotional is something called bhakti yoga. This devotion, this unwielding, unyielding, just blind devotion to the teacher or the god or the gods or whatever, unquestioning. That's what they're saying is dangerous. and can lead to being abused and enslaved by
That's
someone.
probably responsible for most of the deaths on this world, right? You know,
Yes,
my version of the Bible is better than your
absolutely.
Quran or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's really the root cause of suffering, you could say, is this perception and in some religious institutions, encouragement of inequality. Right?
So whoever would like to raise your hand and ask Kelvin anything you want to ask him about what he's said or what he hasn't said, or to clarify, please do that. If you can use the raise hand function, just so we don't get everybody talking at once. But please, you know, he is more than happy to answer questions and clarify. So who would like to ask something? Quentin, would you like to? Okay, unmute. There you go.
So we all know from the Bible that Jesus also healed people. And I'm familiar with a German, Bruno Groening, who also came to Earth and was in, after World War II, was healing a lot of people, allegedly, but apparently documented that he was doing this. So has I said anything about healing? Has Newman said anything about the healing? Or
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Jesus healed people. We those of us who were there, we remember, and other people can heal as well. So this other gentleman who I don't know, you mentioning, other people. It's not just Jesus who can heal, but did Jesus heal people? Yes. And the thing that one of the things that I remember the most about being with Jesus is his ability to know that person, whoever it was, to see into what we could refer to as their soul, their mind, their soul, their consciousness, all their strengths, their weaknesses, everything. And he could see that immediately. That was a gift that he had and that he demonstrated to us on a daily basis. And to me, that's how he described love to us, is loving the other person, is seeing them for who they are, accepting who they are, not who you wish they were. And that, to me, is one of the key ingredients to healing anybody, is perceiving who they are and not getting your stuff mixed in with them, with their stuff, right? And that's a healer, a healer who can distinguish. And I'm not talking about intellectually. I'm not talking about doing some affirmation before. I'm not talking about doing a meditation to think about this. I'm talking about spontaneously, that it's a state of being. It's a state of being that person has. That's true healer. And that's what I observed with him many times, whether he was healing the person or not. That level of love, you hear a lot of people talk about Jesus being a love, and the level of love and so forth, which was absolutely true, because he accepted whatever being it was, human or animal. He accepted them for who they were, and then not who he imagined they should be, or some ideal image that he had of them, or just being. That's what people talk about, being in the present, being in the moment, accepting and loving. That's really, to me, what true love is. Otherwise, it's just liking. A lot of people do a lot of liking. I like you when you do this for me. I don't like you when you do that. That's not love. That's liking. Okay, we can call that liking. It's not really love. They say, well, I love it. I love you when you do this, but I don't love you so much. That's not love. That's not in the way he defined love. I like the way he defined love. Yeah.
So some beings have a special ability for this, for healing.
Sure,
for example,
yeah.
Bruno Groening showed up in Germany after World War II and would stand on the balcony over hundreds or thousands of people, and people would throw away their crutches and were really clearly healed. So
yeah, there's several elements in the healing element, obviously, because some of those people maybe just believed so much in his ability to heal that they felt healed. So, I mean, it's hard to say, exactly. Healing is where's the objective and subjective line in a healing of any kind. Even in Western medicine, there's many things that cannot be explained, and yet their cancer went into remission. Okay, it's just whatever, so where's the subjective, where's the objective line? To me, it's immaterial. Is the person healthier now? Then great. Are they happier now for whatever reason? Then great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, great question. AJ, would you like to there you
Yeah,
go.
sure. That was great, Kelvin. I wanted to know if you think that part of the plan that you just mentioned and part of what's really going on right now regarding the spiritual awakening that most people are experiencing, first of all, if they have something to do with the fact that we are having a growing number of NDEs, people are being resuscitated more than in previous decades, especially more than during the last century. So there are more of these mystical experiences, and people like probably you and George are having like downloads, and more of these type of phenomena are taking place. So do you think we are going through a special area? Oh, I did not know. I did not have my video on. Okay, so do you think that we are going through like a new era of awakening where a higher understanding will be revealed to mankind, and that will probably abolish the differences between religions, and religion itself will be affected because people are understanding that spirituality is more important than religion? Well, that's like my general question. So do you think we are going through a general spiritual transformation?
So I think it depends on your perspective. And because there are many people who would disagree, out of the 8 billion people on planet Earth, who would completely disagree with you and say, they don't feel that at all. Okay. So it depends where you're sitting. So I think the people who are more spiritually oriented definitely have a tendency to feel that and notice that more. They're predisposed to it, right? But if you look at, we're talking 8 billion humans on planet Earth right now. And is what's gonna cause a material change in what you're describing, for example, the disparity and the disagreements and the conflict, we'll just call it, amongst different religions, and even within the same religion, is within Islam. Look at the disparity within Christianity. Look at just within these different religions. Look at the Buddhists are killing the Muslims. In Asia. I don't know if you guys know that, but you have Buddhist monks who are murdering Muslims. Now, how does that fit with Buddhism? So they're doing this kind of stuff right now, today, in 21st century Earth. Will that change? Well, the hope by the movement, we hope that it will, but we have seen this been going on for tens of thousands of years, and the movement has been trying to, as we said, we've described, and as George describes in more detail on the 30th November talk that I suggest that you watch, they've been working on it for the last 7,000 to 10,000 years, and look at where we are now. Now, has things improved? Yes, and George points out some of the improvements over the last 7,000 to 10,000 years. But are we where we need to be? No, you obviously say, are saying we're not, and I agree with you. Now, is there a major spiritual awakening happening that all of a sudden overnight things are going to change? I say no. That's the overnight part. Is there a major spiritual awakening happening? I hope so. But even if there is, it's not based on 1% or 2% or 0.1% of the world's population making that having these self-realizations that we're talking about, okay, and the change in how they behave towards other, et cetera, et cetera. It has to be, it gets to be, you cannot change, you can influence people. So here's a big message. There's another big message out of the 30th November talk. Maybe one of the biggest ones, actually, Shaun, takeaways, is free will. In understanding free will, that in the context of your question, AJ, understanding that, yes, we can influence other people's minds to hopefully make better choices by teaching, but we cannot force somebody to be a good person if they feel like hurting somebody. That's their choice. We cannot force them. Now, we can do social things. I'm not a blind, I'm not blind to the need for some people to be imprisoned, all right? Socially, but I'm talking about spiritually. We're talking about spiritually in terms of spiritual choices people make, personal choices. Cannot control them. They want to believe in that way, they believe in that way. So to me, that's a longer term project. I have a longer term view of this because it's an educational process. It's not a, you got to believe this way. That's the whole point of no more guru disciple, no more divinity, no more worshiping. Takeaway from the 30th November talk is the fact that the cup half full of that is don't do that, but the cup half full is do recognize free will of other people, not just yourself. Most people will say, yeah, I got free will. I can make up my choices, choose whatever I want to do. They forget that the other beings, the other 8 billion humans and other trillions of animals. Look, you go on my Facebook, you see this little guy, Jasper, the cat, 3 years old, who just tragically got hit by I took care of him for 5 weeks. He tragically got hit by a truck. It's very, sad for me. He influenced my life, okay, in some way. And you'll see I influenced his life. You'll see a video of him, when I came back after a few days. And it's like trillions of animals, 8 billion humans making free will decisions, influencing each other. We cannot control them, you see. And, just like Jehovah could not control the choices of people who decided to crucify we could call him his only begotten soul son, not biological son, Jesus. He could not control those priests from deciding to crucify him. It was their free will decisions. So if Jehovah can, if people who view Jehovah as God, if God cannot control, then how do we expect to control the spiritual decisions of people so that they don't go kill each other in the name of God? That's their choice. So we only can educate. And so education to me is a longer term project. Does that answer your question I don't want to throw water on our enthusiasm. We need to continue to do what we need to do to influence and teach. That's why I do what I do. But I understand now I cannot save people who do not want to be saved or taught. Does that make sense?
And not everyone is
for
here
sure.
to be saved. I mean, a lot of people have different plans to be here. And I've always felt it's kind of arrogant. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing half the time, let alone what's good for somebody else.
Exactly. And not only that, Shaun, but what you think you were supposed to do may have changed because you changed it, or because somebody else influenced your decisions, and then you changed it because they said this and that and the other thing, and it's completely different from your original soul plan. This is like a lot of things. There's a lot of factors going on in this in our lives. It's not so black and white. Oh, I made a soul plan. That's my life purpose. Oh, am I doing it or not? That's like so simplistic. And can it ever happen in somebody's life? It's possible. Is it likely? No. It's much more complicated than that because you have 8 billion now humans influencing that. And most of them you don't even know. Like, look at all these, we just had elections in the United States. Those of you who are not in the United States may not know. We just had these elections, midterm elections. I don't know any of these people. Not one of them do I know. Might some of these crazy people influence my life? Yeah. Might they change some of my free will decisions? Yes. Might they change some of my friends' free will decisions or my family's? Yeah. So, that we have to remember that there's all of that going on too, even though we may want a spiritual awakening. And I would love to have that, AJ. And that's why I do what I do. I'm encouraging it. I'm not discouraging it, but I can't control it. That's what I'm saying. Right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And also AJ he wants to interview. I'll put you guys together. Like, he has
Yeah,
a-
I wanted to ask you that after the event.
I'll
but-
put you guys together on Facebook.
Right, great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Awesome.
Yeah, like you were saying, I'm starting to realize sometimes our purpose is really whatever's in this moment. The
It
next moment, the purpose may be different.
Yeah, that's true. But we can also have plans and we can change plans.
Right. Yes.
So it's not about like, look, you and I have talked about our business backgrounds, you and I separately, privately, and you have a business background in sales and marketing. You don't go in without a plan.
Right.
You're in sales and marketing. You go in with your marketing plan, your sales plan, and you have goals and this and that and the other. Okay, fine. But do you change them if all of a sudden there's a COVID outbreak? Yeah, you're going to change your sales and marketing plan, right? If you don't, you're an idiot. So why not apply those same principles to ourselves? We learn in business schools. Right? Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Laura.
Hello. I have a question. And I'm really sorry that I wish I was here on time so I could have heard the whole thing. But I have a question about what you do when, like, I'm in this state and I've been here now for, like, I'd say a year of learning a lot, like a ton. I mean, I had a spiritual awakening that was like, I wouldn't believe it if I heard it. So it's like a transition between understanding that what I see is not real, and anyway, and that, like, the miracle is a state of reality. How do I, like, I know that everything behind me had a purpose, but nothing of, like, the 3D world interests me in any way. And it's like I'm almost willing to give up everything that I have in order to keep myself from having to go back to work. Because it's like I just want to read A Course in Miracles all day. And as wonderful as that is, like I like I'm gonna
you have to put food on the table and you have to eat and all that. Yeah.
So how do you like, I can feel your enthusiasm, and it's like I know that there's something out there that will make my heart sing. But how do you kind of like, is there a way to, like, expedite finding it, or
So here's the thing. Let's just I'll give you a bunch of different perspectives on your question. Okay, we'll go 100,000 foot first. Got to understand, the thinking of the movement, and this has been my thinking as well, is that we are eternal souls. So the FOMO, you know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out, right? FOMO. Yeah. Get rid of that. We will never run out of time because there is no beginning and end to our existence as individuals. Talking about as individual minds, as personalities. So this is my third book that I'm trying to finish in the next couple of months on my personalities over the last 6,000 years, my past life memories, and how the personality has persisted over these couple of dozen lifetimes as what you see the personality is today. And so get rid of this fear of missing out. You got plenty of time. Now that said,
can I add one thing on this level? I know everyone says this, but like, on the other side, I was told that it's my last lifetime on Earth. So I feel like I've already done, I'm not worried about missing out on anything. when I was asked if I wanted to come back, I said, there's nothing of this world that interests me in any way.
Don't
So
have
no,
you don't have to
but-
come back. You don't have to come back, but you can continue to learn on the other side. People think, oh, you don't learn anything. You continue. People can learn on this side and the other side. The whole notion that you come here to learn is a myth if you think of it as an absolute statement about everybody. Some of us come back here to learn. Those of us who choose to come back here to learn, learn. Those who come back here to just get soft serve ice cream or get drunk or have sex, come back here to have soft serve ice cream, get drunk, and have sex. That's what they're coming back here to do. You want to call that their life purpose? That is their life purpose, and that's their choice. And don't judge them for doing it, because that's their choice. That's a 30th November message. Don't go judging people based on what you think their state of consciousness is because all they do is get drunk every weekend. Whatever. It's no, that's their choice. If you choose to learn about yourself and open up more to your spirituality and who you are as a soul and expand your conscious capacity for experience, as I talk about in my classes, that's your choice. That's my choice. I don't foist my choices on other people, and I don't judge them for it. And what I found is that in my interactions with people who are like that, they open up to me because I am more. I have tried to. I'm still working on it. This is an eternal project for me to try to exemplify what I observed in Jesus for those 3 or 4 years that I was with him. And I get emotional saying this. It's like, it's that. And when you start to capture that and you start to see the influence you have on somebody like that person who would never, ever say they came here to learn anything other than the XYZs I laid out, to me, that's life-changing for me. How it affects them, I don't know, quite frankly, but how it affects me is huge. And so that's why I keep coming back, I think. Now, you don't have to come back, Laura. Nobody says there's no panel of judges. There's no cosmic energetic system that says you got to come back and you got to come back to Earth. No, you can stay on the other side as long as you want, but you can learn as much as you want on the other side too. You don't have to be in a physical biological body. There's certain things that people enjoy being in a physical biological body. One of the things is eating. A lot of people enjoy eating. So whatever, but a lot of other things. But I'm just saying, you don't have to learn, just be in a physical biological body. Okay.
Well, I was wondering, because I worked with someone who does past life regression, and I could not see anything. The one time that I could see something, it was very, very short, and I got almost no information. So I was just wondering.
This is a really important point. What's your question, though?
Well, I was just wondering if I feel like I probably have so much, like what you said about Jesus. One of the things that I've been saying is I feel like from the moment I got back, I can see right into someone's soul. I see all their insecurities because they're all mine. And it's like, I don't want to know those things. I don't want to see them, but I have to learn how to see God in myself, and then I'll see it in them. But right now I just see myself in everyone else.
Well, that's a self-love issue, and you got layers of stuff going on here. So you need. This is the book that Shaun gave away to somebody or lent to somebody. This is my book here. You look up my name. So self-love. There's a whole bunch. There's 67 essays that I've written in there, and the issue about loving oneself is crucial. And you see stuff that you don't like in other people, then you're running away from that. Then that's running away from yourself. And so knowing ourselves is another key element that comes out of this 30th November talk. Knowing oneself, that we have eternity, whether you're on the other side or this side, to do whatever you need to do to learn more about who you are. To me, that's what spiritual development is. It's not about having this experience, NDEs and this and that. Okay, fine, NDEs are fine and so forth. It may give people a glimpse into a different reality, which is great. It's not nothing, but it's the beginning. It's like the first step. I've been to so many NDE conferences and people are just talking about their NDE over and over and over again, and they're marking time. They're not growing. They're
Thank you. They're changing one story for a new story.
yes, they're just changing one story to another story and another story. I'm about changing the structure of how we experience life. And that means life, Laura, on this side or the other side, it doesn't matter, okay? The experience of life. How do we change the structure of how we're experiencing it? Not just replacing, as Shaun just said, another experience for another experience. That's what most people are doing. I call that spiritual materialism, is what I call that, okay? There's other essays in my book about that. But to your point about reincarnation and past life regression, this is a really important point. You do not have to know, you do not have to remember your past lives like I have. And if you do, great. If you spontaneously do, fine. I'm not against going to a past life regressionist, but I am not a proponent of.
I didn't go for that. I actually went for belief systems.
Okay,
Change
but
my
here,
belief system.
let me just finish the teaching point here, which is because it may not apply to you, but I say this in my classes to people. Do not pine away for trying to know all about your past lives, because you may find something that's so distressing to you that it could cause you more emotional pain and could give you more baggage that now you're going to have to get rid of. So it's looking at our emotional patterns. Our fears and our desires are what drive us. And those are most likely associated with past lives that we've had that you don't have to know all the nitty-gritty details of, okay? You don't have to go through the garbage can and relive the stuff, because you just, the reminder by looking at fears and desires and emotional patterns is what I teach people to look at. That will propel us forward as equally as fast as remembering key stuff from a past life spontaneously. So you don't
Also, the past life doesn't matter. It's more the baggage that we carry,
exactly,
that
and
we drag with us from life to life versus the whole past life.
exactly, and it's the learning from our experiences, to Laura's point about who we are. That's what propels us forward. So when you see stuff in somebody else, Laura, that you don't like, make note of that and think about how you can change yourself so that you can embrace even that part of yourself, because self-love means not just liking the stuff that you like, it means liking everything about who we are, including the warts. Otherwise, it's not self-love. It's not love in the way Jesus defined love to us. Accepting the other for who they are, not who you wish they were. Accepting ourselves for who we are, not who we wish we were. Not the ideal image of who we are. That's fantasy. That's imagination. Okay, that's how I define imagination. There's nothing wrong with having fantasy and imagination sometimes, but don't live our lives based on that. We need to live and embrace our lives in the reality of what is at that moment. And the other point is, somebody who told you this is your past life, nobody can say that. Anybody who makes an absolute statement like that is either reading an inclination that you may have. So they may be reading your mind about, oh, I don't want to come back anymore. So then they read that and then they say that to you. Or it may be filtered through their belief system that, oh, only people only have a certain amount of lifetime. So whenever I hear people say, oh, this is your last lifetime, or this is your...
nobody told me that. When I was on the other side, it was explained to me that it was. Because I kept asking, like, why would you pick me? Why would you pick me? So it wasn't anything. I had no like spiritual.
Here's the other filter. You need to filter everything that's said to you. Everybody on the other side does not know more than you or Shaun or anybody else on this side. Okay? The assumption that people who have NDEs have, or any spiritual transformation experience, they assume that everything, the medium or the psychic, or if you have an NDE yourself, you go to the other side yourself, people assume that beings on the other side know the answer and they're giving you the right answer. No, some of them might not. Example, this guy in San Francisco had an NDE, and in his NDE, his guru and a light being are arguing over whether he should come back or not. And his guru is saying, you got to come back because you got to finish the projects we was working on. And this other light being is telling the guy in his NDE, no, you can come here, and you should come here and just relax, and you can do all this stuff over here, So he's got two beings, two light beings on the other side. One's just a light being, and the other he recognizes. He doesn't know who the light being is, but he's some powerful light being. And the other light being is his dead guru. And both of them are disagreeing about what this guy should do. Obviously, he chose his guru's advice and he came back and he made that free will decision. So I use that example as one of many hundreds of examples that I have where you don't just blindly follow anything that anybody tells you, including beings on the other side. Okay? The assumption that they know what's right for you that's exactly what the 30th, exactly what the movement, they didn't get into this whole thing in great detail, but that's the subset of what they're saying. No blind following, always question, filter, filter, filter. It's what I teach in all my classes, right? And I teach you how you can assess and how you can filter and how you can consider what's reliable and what's unreliable. There are red flags. Okay.
Great question,
Good
Laura.
question. Really.
Sandy, you had your hand up and then it went down.
Well, it did, because I'm not quite sure that this is the right time or place, but since you called on me, I just wanted to go back to something that you said earlier, Kelvin,
Hold on just a quick. Do you want to turn on your camera or no?
Well, okay, fine.
It doesn't matter if you're
it's
in
like
bed.
She's in her pajamas, she said.
I've seen you in bed and you've got a beautiful bed and you always look good in bed. So don't worry about that. Oh, wait, unmute. Gotta unmute.
You're muted.
Unmute.
There we go. All right. Shaun's always seen me at my worst, so it doesn't really matter. But I was really intrigued by what you said about, for those of us who remember our past lives being on this planet with Yeshua, when I've had two different experiences with that, one very spontaneous, but each time it did lead me to a sense of deep, deep grief. And that I don't think I've ever in this lifetime, except for perhaps when I lost my grandmother as a young girl, that grief that comes up out of nowhere, and it just completely overtakes you. But it wasn't necessarily the first time. It was almost like joy and grief at the same time. I don't quite know how to explain it, but the second time I had the remembrance of my lifetime on earth with Yeshua was, I didn't want to let go of the memories because there was such joy in being with him or near him that I didn't want to let go of that connection. And so I don't know if that's related to watching the crucifixion, but from what I was able to discern on my own, it wasn't just a short period of time. I was a little girl and I looked at him what I think was happening, or what I got a little bit of clarity on. I don't know if I can trust what I experienced or not, but I was a little girl. He was a friend of my older brother. I looked to him as he was an older brother to me. And he was leaving. I don't know, maybe 8 or 9, and he was leaving. And my heart was just breaking because he was leaving to go somewhere. And the grief of him leaving was coupled with the feeling that I had being with him, that I didn't want to break that connection. And so I just, I've never met anybody else who's ever had those kinds of experiences before. So I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you were probably there. Who knows? I would, you never know for sure, but the depth to which the emotion, I suggest people look at and all the different senses, and how clear is the memory, and the different senses that one experiences, not just visual, but maybe smell and taste and touch too. And that those are just, it's hard to say absolutely, but when you start to have very clear memories and feelings and so forth that are unusual, and that or information that you did not necessarily even know about, but somehow you did know about, some part of you knew about, those are like little kind of ways of kind of assessing, I guess, is what I'm saying. But sounds like, yeah, we could have an offline conversation.
And also outside confirmation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Laura, I wanted to come back to you, Laura. Did you finish your questions with me?
Hold on a sec. We'll go back to Laura. If you want to talk, I just want to acknowledge that Sandy is the one that actually listened to me when I was trying to integrate through our spiritual book studies, that I needed to talk to other near-death experiencers. Like nobody got it, but Sandy got it. So she is responsible for our first little NDE group and for the fact that I'm doing this now. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you, Sandy.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Laura, go
Back
ahead.
to Laura.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fascinated listening to these stories. I guess well, I mean, I don't know how to put this. I suppose in a group like this, it might, it's not good. I don't have to worry about what everyone's gonna think. But one of the things that was explained to me on the other side was how my life would parallel Jesus's. And the reason for that was that I had 3 mental illnesses and 16 back surgeries and an autoimmune disease, and it's all gone. And anyway, this was the only thing that I was really supposed to remember, that like Jesus didn't come here for the reason I was taught in church. He came here to show us what we're capable of. And anyway, the whole thing, I guess the question was mainly, how do you go from, like, I had a pretty decent life, like materially. So I can go back to a job where I'll make money, but it's like, it's not what I want to do. And it's almost like the higher I ascend, the less tolerance I have for doing these like things that are meaningless.
Yeah.
So how do you make that like jump and figure out where you're supposed to be?
Yeah. Well, that's between you and you, but I can give you some tips. All right. But it's obviously a very personal thing between you and yourself. And I don't know what your lifestyle is and this and that, and where your values are. You got children, no children, with us, all of those factors. Okay. So this is a very personal thing, but I've been through this, as you can probably tell, the same kind of thing, this wrestling match, we'll just call it, that you're kind of mentally going through, right? Mentally, emotionally, psychically, whatever, going through. And I've been going through this lifetime in many times. So you those of you know, I mean, if you go look at my LinkedIn, I won't bore you with the history, but if you look at your LinkedIn, my LinkedIn, you go like, how many careers did this guy have? It's like, so I changed, Laura, at different times because of how my, how would I say this? How my assessment of my own personal and spiritual needs changed at that point, or those points, plural, in my life. And it was different at different times in my life. When I was single in my 20s and I taught full time and I didn't really have to worry about income, etc. and et cetera. And I was teaching meditation full time. And then all of a sudden, I got to get a job because, I borrowed how much money from my aunt and I got to pay her back, and whatever. And that's true story. And then, can I make a living doing this? And then went to law school and then had children. And then to children and raising a family became my priority. And it became my spiritual and personal priority. And I continue teaching meditation for all these years on the side, but I had to make more money and so forth and so on. These are all personal choices. I'm not saying you have to do what I did. I'm just giving myself as an example of the angst that I went through at different times and how I adjusted at different times. And, now I'm doing this for the last 10 years because I'm at this stage in my life where my kids they're not, I still have to help them out a little bit sometimes, but they're pretty much doing their thing now. They're, late 20s, early 30s and so forth. But that's my journey. And it has not been straight line at all, and it hasn't been 2 straight lines or 3 straight lines. It's been a whole bunch of this and that. Okay. And it's very personal. So my only advice to you is to adjust, as I said, depending on where you're at that particular moment, and don't make a categorical black and white decision that this is what it's going to be like for the rest of my life, because you don't know what the rest of your life is going to be like. This is the free will decisions that other people who in your orbit, who you may don't even think about it in your orbit, like the congressman who just got elected in state so-and-so is a little wacky, is going to influence my life, Laura. I don't have control over that stuff, but it may influence me, and I may have to make a shift in my planning, let's say. But I think you're very conscious, obviously, and you've been through a lot. I mean, if you've gotten through the mental issues and your gajillion back surgeries, oh my God, I can't, and you're doing so well now, that says something about the strength of your soul, the strength of your soul, the strength of your energy, strength of who you are, your personality. That says something positive about that. So that means to me that you are equipped with whatever between you and you needs to have to get figured out, and then take some steps and see how that goes. To me, that's what I used to do life coaching with people and going through this, very difficult kind of situations with people. And I'd give them this kind of spiritual guidance and so forth, but they'd have to put food on the table. So they have to, what can you adjust here and there and so forth, so that you can still be meeting your spiritual needs that you have without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So it's a juggling act. Not everybody has the, it's easy to say, you see these celebrities and they'll say, just follow your passion. Just follow your passion, whatever it is, follow your passion. It's a nice thing to say, and it's not bad advice. At the same time, what I've said to people, like I was interviewed by Dartmouth Alumni Magazine about myself, because I've had such a varied career. And I'm not the usual guy who just went to Dartmouth, went to law school, or went to medical school and became a doctor and then retired, or became a lawyer and then became a partner in a law firm and then made $1 gajillion and had 3 or 4 houses and then retired. That's not me. And so they interviewed me about this for some of the younger, literally the kids who were graduating in the last several years. And I said to them, my passion has always been, you can read this online, you can dig it up somewhere, it's online. But I said something like, whatever I said was much better than what I'm going to say to you guys now, probably. But I said something like, my passion has always been to acknowledge myself, my own personal and spiritual needs as best I could. But how I've defined them has changed. And when I was raising a child, 2 children, and my wife and I were raising 2 children, my spiritual needs were less about me and my teaching of meditation, and more about my ability to raise and nurture my children in a spiritual household. In other words, my teaching was more around them than my getting out, teaching students kind of a thing, and more about creating an opportunity where job-wise, I had enough money so that I could have here's an interesting point. I could have the flexibility to be able to self-reflect and teach my kids spiritually. I didn't say this in the interview, but this would be a great thing to include in that as a PS, a PS on it, a footnote, because when we are in survival mode, how self-reflective can you be? It's very difficult. I've been laid off 5 times since I was 50 years old, and I've been in survival mode and family survival mode. It's very difficult to be self-reflective. And humanity has been in survival mode most of the millions of years humanity's been on planet Earth, if you think about it. It's only recently when we've been able to be self-reflective in the last few hundred years, 500 years or whatever, I don't know. And even then, probably more like the last 150 years for the masses to be self-reflective. And self-reflective to me is fundamental to being spiritual. Really, if you're in survival mode and it's kill or be killed, it's very difficult to be self-reflective. So I chose, back to my life coaching point here to you, Laura, I chose about myself to have a job where I could teach. And when I was in the law firms, I was teaching people how to be better people as lawyers with their clients. And I was getting paid for that. But I was getting paid enough so that then I could have the flexibility to be self-reflective with my children and to teach my children to be spiritual beings. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
I don't know if that helps you at all, but you have the tools. You've said enough to us here. You've revealed enough about your journey to elucidate the fact that you have the tools in your personality, in your soul, in your consciousness, in your mind to figure this out. I'm confident that you.
And I just want to add, almost all of us as NDErs and people that have had these spurs, we all go through that. I certainly did, and still am, so it's really normal. I just think
that's a really good point, Shaun. It's a really good.
Be easy on yourself and it'll come.
Yes.
It'll come to you. Just listen. I mean, I still don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I just try to listen every day.
Listen to yourself. That's a really good point. It comes full circle to what I said to you at the beginning, Laura, about the FOMO, the fear of missing out and the eternity thing. But I understand you don't want to wait for eternity. You want to do it now in your lifetime now while you're here in Laura on planet Earth right now. And I get that. But Shaun's point is really a good point, which is when you've had such life-changing, spiritually transformative experience like you just described. I mean, I can only imagine, what it was like because of what the results of what you just said. When it's that dramatic, you want to go, I'm dropping everything because this is where I want to spend all my attention. And I understand that. And it's, as Shaun said, we've all been there, and I did it for 10 years in my 20s. But I don't know you, and I don't know where you're at in your life.
Well, my biggest problem, I don't have kids, and my biggest problem is just that I can do anything I want. And it's like, I'm just waiting, I'm waiting for it to come to me. I'm waiting for whatever it is that I'm supposed to do. But the hardest thing I think I've ever had to do is just be. Like, I am learning how to be Laura right now. And tomorrow I'll be Laura again right now. And it's just being, just learning how to be.
You should take you could offline, we can talk about my meditation class.
Yeah. And that's a good place to be. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Just be.
It's it. Easily.
Thanks, Laura, for the great question.
That's great.
Is there anybody else that had a question that you'd like to ask before we questions, comments before we end this, since we've gone way over? Kelvin could go all night, I'm sure. Kathy Bachman, did you want to ask a question? You have your thumb up.
Yeah. Tried to give her the hand, but I didn't get that.
Do you want to turn on your camera or no?
I can do that. Just a moment. Came to me. I've been working with one person, two people, and this idea of just letting go, or I have a sense of is a way of letting go of being in this needing or feeling a need to identify so much with the physical and making sense.
Yeah, we said, I missed the beginning. Did you say you're working with two people and that's the advice you've been giving them? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Sorry.
Mostly I'm the one they're working with. I turn it the other way around.
Oh, sorry.
But that there is this sense. One of them is someone who had a near-death experience and seems to have a lot of, it wasn't as a result of her near-death experience, but since has been a place of non-attachment, I believe.
I'm getting some other voices here, so I'm missing out everything. Is everybody muted, Shaun? Is everybody muted? Yeah. Go ahead. Say again. Sorry. Say the last couple of sentences. Sorry.
I have a sense of, and I don't think it's a willful thing. I've also been studying some of Dr. David Hawkins' work. This place of non-attachment. And I have a sense that there is a goal of being non-attached and being more, for lack of better words, at one with everything.
So yeah, you want to ask, are you asking, is that a question? You want me to comment? Yeah.
Yes, please.
So here's the thing. There's a model that I use in some of my classes and some of my essays in my books. So when people talk about this idea of non-attachment, they're talking about this idea of with external objects of experience and not getting attached to your car or how much money you make and that kind of thing. Really, what's that?
Or your body, or
your body, yeah. Because here's the thing. So I like to use different language because I don't like the attachment, non-attachment language, because the attachment, non-attachment language makes it sound like the body is not important, or how much, your job is not important. They are important for certain reasons and sectors in life. My body is important for me to function in a physical form. And so I need to take care of my body and feed it, nourish it, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't like this idea of don't be attached to your body. The phrase that I prefer that we use is don't identify who we are with the XYZ fill in the blank. Okay. So whatever you're talking about, your BMW, your new car, how much money you make, where your kids go to school. Okay. I understand that's where this concept that you're talking about comes from, is because people do identify with the fill in the blank, the XYZs. I put XYZ because they change, right? Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. What we forget is that there's this side of the equation. And so really what the people who are preaching and teaching this non-attachment idea, I reframe what they're saying is, we forget who we are. We are our consciousness, our mind, our soul, whatever. I use the simple English, I call it mind, but I don't mean my waking state mind that's deciding, which street to turn down when I'm driving the car. I'm talking about that plus the vastness of my consciousness, my mind. So this is who we are. We're the experiencer of our experiences over there. So yeah, when they say don't get attached to this, what they mean is this is who we are. Okay, fine. So that's the intellectual understanding of this. And I like the reframing of the language and not saying it's attachment or non-attachment because it makes it sound good or bad. And it's not a good or bad, negative, positive thing. It's an identification thing. we're not our things. You know, we are the experiencer of our experiences. Okay. But the other part of that is embracing our physical reality also. And that's another reason why I don't like this, oh, don't get attached, shouldn't be attached idea, because this is in the 30th November talk, and George gets into this somewhat, actually. He talks about this notion of denying physical reality, denying any kind of reality outside of yourself. Even if you die and you're on the other side, this idea of non-attachment, if you really take it to its understanding and apply it the way it's taught, is you're denying everything on the other side too. Everything that's outside of who you are and who you are, the experiencer, is to be denied? No. That's why I don't like the word attachment, or non-attachment. I prefer to say, okay, that's not who I am. I am the experiencer of my experiences on the other side, and I am the experiencer of my experiences on this side. Embrace all that. No, don't create this either or. It's a both and. I am the experiencer of that. I see myself as distinct from that, but I embrace all of you who are not me. And I embrace my physical body, which is not my soul. And I embrace all of that. So to me, it's an inclusion. I prefer to take an inclusionary, as opposed to non-attachment is an exclusionary languaging. Okay. And it creates, to me, long-term, the reason I nitpick some of these words is when they create suffering, and that view of life creates suffering. It's not healthy. Okay. I don't know if that helps. Does that help? Does that help?
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Oh, you
it
said
also-
more?
You got to follow up? Go ahead.
It also tells me, back to what you were saying, to reference myself. It's I think like being my own teacher.
Yes, yeah. And you can get guidance from others. There's no problem with that. But we are ultimately our own teachers. We are the filter. We
are our own gurus.
We are. Yeah. That's the message. Yeah.
And that's what, the whole thing that he's trying to say. You don't have to believe everything that Kelvin has said. You don't have to believe everything they say. What resonates with you, take and throw everything out. And that's the whole message, that, we shouldn't just take anything from anybody, the Dalai Lama, whoever, blindly. Question everything.
Yeah.
Because we all came here with free will, and we all came here with access to knowledge. And
what is useful knowledge for Shaun, or you, Kathy, or Cy, or Quentin, or Laura, or me, or Gyro, whose hands up I see. What's useful knowledge for that person may not be useful knowledge for you, or it might be useful knowledge for you.
And also because we're not all on the same path.
No, exactly. Absolutely. Everybody is doing their thing. And so we are each, and there's a beauty to that. So this merging idea that they also debunk in the 30th of November. And if you want to watch the talk, and then when I do the Q&A, after you've watched the talk, you can raise questions about merging and this and that. I'm planting seeds here tonight.
Right.
But,
and that's the purpose, for everybody to watch this maybe over Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
then go to his Q&A,
Yep.
and then ask him more questions.
More questions. Ask me Q&A in the Q&A that I'm going to do on 30th November, this next week, I guess. So, but it's beautiful points you're raising here, because it goes to this notion of being our own guru, as Shaun said, and figuring stuff out, though, because it's an ongoing process. It's not like your own guru and I got everything figured out now. No, it's like I got everything, some of the stuff figured out, and now I'm figuring something else out because something else came up. That's what life is all about, to me anyway. And not, again, I understand not everybody chooses to live their life that way. And I'm not saying that they have to, and I'm not saying I have a better life because I live that way. No, it's how I choose to, and it's what makes me happy. And so whatever makes people happy, I'm a proponent of that, whatever that is. And I respect that, even if it's choices that it's not what I would do, okay.
And that's when we have access to the most guidance, is when we're happy and enjoy. It seems like that's when we're most connected.
Yeah.
So, okay, so there's a question that's from the chat that I need to ask
Go ahead.
because she couldn't unmute.
Yeah.
And this is from Sharon. Okay, so just a sec.
Mhm.
Okay, so can you now try and quickly explain to us, and many of us I think know this answer and many of us don't, that why the world has so many people with what appears to be narcissistic personality disorder? What's their purpose here? And what's our purpose for getting involved with family members or relationships with people with narcissistic personality disorder? And can I just give an answer just real quick?
Go ahead, go for it. Yeah.
My answer is that they're here to teach us to love ourselves, because they're going to abuse us and beat us as long as we allow them. And when we actually start loving ourselves, and I can only answer this because I've spent my whole life with narcissists, and they still come out of everywhere. And the more we learn to love ourselves, that's what I think they're here to teach. But that's just my personal experience. So
Yeah.
Kelvin,
I couldn't have said it any better, Shaun. I'll add to it, but that is primary point number one. Right now, first of all, let's just step back for a second. Narcissists aren't planted here by God or some beings or whatever in order to teach us lessons, but we can learn lessons from them, and that's what we're talking about here. Because again, nobody's creating some screenplay or theater where, okay, you're going to go down, you're going to be a narcissist, and you're going to haunt Shaun Lether for all his life. And no. People, why are people narcissists? First of all, they're narcissists because they're very lacking in self-confidence. They're very insecure. Okay, so that a narcissist, you got to understand, bullies are incredibly insecure people, because as I briefly alluded to earlier, that George briefly describes in 30th November talk, this whole cruelty idea. That's why bullies bully, is because they feel weak and they depress other people around them. By bullying them, they feel better. Okay, so that's why narcissists are narcissists typically. Okay, but Shaun's right on the mark. Can we learn from them if they appear in our lives? Yes. And the primary point number one of what Shaun said is to love ourselves. We have to, because if we don't love ourselves, they will bully us more. They love to see vulnerability. A bully is really good at, a narcissist, a bully is really good at recognizing what your weaknesses are, and they exploit it, okay? That's what they do. That's how they're wired, okay? And once they've been doing this for many decades, and arguably many lifetimes, they get very skilled at it. So what you have to do and I've written and spoken about this, Transcending Cruelty, there's an essay in this book about that, and with step-by-step kind of how to deal with them. But the short answer is, you got to strengthen yourself from the inside out for sure. But you recognize what they're doing, and you throw them a curveball. That's how you deal with them. You don't play into you don't cower. You don't go in a corner and say, oh, don't do that to me anymore. No, that's exactly what they want to do. That makes them happy. You don't reinforce their bad behavior, okay? But the other element is that they're teaching us, they could be teaching us, we should learn from it anyway, is boundaries, is how to create boundaries with other people. And it's very difficult for people who are very psychic or spiritually oriented or empathic, because empaths feel everybody else's stuff. And the problem that I have many clients who I've helped who are empaths. The biggest thing for them to learn is that other people's emotions are not yours. Yours are yours and theirs are theirs. And you understand it's a boundary and create a boundary, because the narcissist wants to exploit that. They love bullying empaths and compassionate and empathic people, they're like prime targets for bullies.
Because they want what we have. I mean, narcissists don't go after anybody. They go after people that have the light, that, you know, have what they don't have.
If they're more enlightened, Shaun, but the less enlightened ones don't even care about that. All they care about is their own sense of satisfaction and happiness, and the fastest way of doing that is making other people miserable around them.
Right. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And, okay, the more self-aware ones might be thinking like you're thinking, but most of them are not that self-aware.
Yeah. Every time I think I have them figured out, I need a new one.
Exactly. So you got to create boundaries and
Exactly. Boundaries is very true. That's because they will test your boundaries.
Yep. Yes. When you start to see that, see you later.
Exactly.
Cut them off. That is loving yourself.
So let's go ahead and move on to Gyro.
Yeah.
You want to unmute?
Yes. So why was it that Jehovah in his Jehovah project saw that we were getting obsessed with devotion to him as God, and maybe grew devotion all around? And how is it, or can you explain how is it that would lead to falling prey to kind of other beings that would take advantage of one? How would that work?
Sure. So what he's meaning when he's saying that, when Jehovah says that, what he's meaning is if people are very devoted to him, and he's a very loving, wise, intelligent being, okay, they get used to being devoted. And the devotion part, the blind following, we could call it, becomes the predominant thing. Not the discernment of who they are devoted to. Because he's such a loving, once you feel his presence and so forth, and God's, what people view as God, he doesn't view himself as God. But, what many of you people view as, well, God's presence is so amazing and so loving and this and that. Then you get, it's not him tricking you, but you forget that not every being is like that. That many beings are flawed, like what Shaun's describing. Not all of them are narcissists, but most beings have some selfishness, we'll call it. Some degree of selfishness. Narcissism is way in the spectrum of selfishness, is way on the extreme end. But most people have some degree of selfishness sometimes, all right, where they're too self-interested. Self-interested is nothing wrong with being self-interested. You got to take care of yourself. But selfish is too self-interested. Narcissism is off the charts, okay? So most people have this imbalance. They're not like Jehovah. And so what Jehovah's saying, Gyro, is, maybe I have allowed you who have been followers of me or others like me. Like there are other gods, Mother Divine in the Vedic tradition, so forth and so on, right? Where they've performed a bhakti, B-H-A-K-T-I is how you spell it in English, but the Sanskrit is bhakti, which means devotion, blind devotion to that God. And then you get married to somebody, and you blindly devote yourself to them because that's what the vows, typically these people's vows are saying, right? Marriage vows. And then you find out that the person is actually pretty selfish and maybe even narcissistic, Shaun. Not you are, but to Shaun's example, maybe your spouse, he or she, is incredibly narcissistic. And now you've been trained in Jehovah's mind. You've been trained through the New Testament version of devotion towards Jehovah, Gyro, right? I mean, the Old Testament, sorry, the Old Testament version of Jehovah, the Old Testament version of being devoted, and now you are married and it's in 21st century Earth to somebody who is a bully and narcissist, and you are conflicted because this whole devotion thing is so ingrained in you, in the way you respond and react to somebody that you are in a committed relationship with. Because most people would argue, I think, agree, not argue, most people would agree that they are in a committed relationship in their spiritual relationship with God. I think most people who believe in God would agree with that, that statement, right? Well, then they take that that committed relationship that they have spiritually with God, and then they transfer that to their marital relationship, because a priest or a justice of the peace or a priest or a minister got up in front of them, usually most people, and they said, do you solemnly, whatever the marital vows are. I had different marital vows when I get married, but we wrote our own. But the traditional marital vows is till death do you part. Devotion, right? Sickness or in health, doesn't matter what, right? Okay. Some variation on that theme in different traditions in the marriage ceremony. Well, okay, that transference gets transferred, you see, and then Jehovah is saying, don't do that with me. I'm not encouraging it. And I've seen how it has led to suffering in the world, because you have now devoted yourself to a military leader who is telling you to go out and kill people in the name of God now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That devotion, right? That blind following. Does that make sense now? Yeah, good question. I'm glad you asked it for further clarification. It's a really important point. Jehovah is really, he's used the words dangerous. That's how explicit he's getting about that. That blind devotion and that divinity worship is dangerous. And he's seen it cause incredible suffering in people he really cares a lot about. Okay. Anything else?
Great question. So if anyone else has a question, go ahead and ask it. But I want to get some clarification on behalf of NDErs or spiritual people that have had other spiritually transformative experiences. You're not telling people to just automatically don't trust the beings that you see on the other side or you experience. You're
Correct.
telling them to question and use their own judgment. Just don't take it blindly. Correct?
Correct.
Just so that nobody gets misunderstood that you shouldn't, that they're lying to you or something.
No, not necessarily lying. And here's the other thing about lying. Some of them might be lying, and they could be hoodwinking you. I mean, could there be beings on the other side that have an agenda? Absolutely. Just like people on this side may have an agenda. So it's no different on the other side. That's possible. But is it more likely that they are well-intentioned and yet have a belief system of X, Y, or Z that they are filtering all of their advice to you through and giving you that advice? Yes, that's true for all of us. I mean, it's true for me. It's on this side of the thing. We all have our filtration system. So the bottom line is what you said. Filter through your filtration system, and does it make sense? Does not matter who you're getting it from, whether they have a body or a physical biological body or a light body, doesn't matter.
Right. Because what people may not understand is just as you go over to the other side, I mean, a lot of people are love and light, but there are some people that go over the other side that are carrying all of their messed up beliefs that they have here, right? I mean, that's what poltergeists and stuff are.
Well, they're still narcissists, to use your other.
Right.
They die, they don't have a biological body. They're a narcissist when they die. They're now a light body, a narcissist with a light body. So, you can stay away from people like that much more easily on the other side, because you don't have to get in a car. You don't have to get in an airplane. Your energy, you can go like, I don't know, can you go 700 million miles per hour, which is the speed of light? I don't know, but you can go probably 100 or 200 or 300 million miles per hour. That's pretty fast. You can get away from people, if you want to. And so you don't have to worry. I don't want to plant fear in people's minds. I'm the anti-fear guy.
No, you're just saying question everything.
Yes.
All of these experiences, question everything.
Use your common sense. And the other cup half full issue I want to underscore also is, when you die, do people who might not, they're kind of borderline. Let's say they're not narcissists when they're dying, but they're borderline, they're pretty good people, but they have their moments. When those people die, they're probably going to be a better person on the other side. Probably. This is all probabilities, nothing guaranteed. Why? Because they don't have to have a job that stresses them out. They don't have to stay healthy, and they don't have to worry about what they're eating. And you can eat all the make-believe energetic chocolate you want on the other side, and you're going to get sick. Whatever, you can eat all the fake fast food on the other side. Fake because it's light, but you don't have to digest it. What do you want on the other side? You're on vacation on the other side. So are people who are borderline going to be a lot nicer on the other side? Yes, they are. So I don't want to create this fearful, you got to watch out for everybody on the other side. But it's not like people die and they become enlightened and they're like, all of a sudden, kumbaya. For a lot of people, yeah. But the narcissists, they just, they might start their own little narcissist group on the other side. You can stay away from them, It's like, see you later, guys. I'm not hanging out with you,
Okay, so Lorelei has a question.
Yeah.
I was just going to piggyback on that. Two different things. What you were just talking about reminds me of and I don't know what your perception on this, because that was part of my question.
Yeah.
Some of the things you described to me are what I call not the astral earth, but where spirits go, but they don't, that are still working out and working different things out, as far as they still have their personality complexes. So they're going to be like that. It's almost like a mirror of earth, you know what I mean, but because I've had lots of different experiences, so I have been to various, I call them frequencies or whatever you want to call them. So
Sure.
So for you, is there a distinction, because some people don't make it past there in their NDEs. So yeah, there's a level of discernment. When you're with that pure unconditional love, because my first one was with that, you know what I mean? I literally
Lorelei,
saw that, but the other ones were kind of I call them Heaven City, like you were describing, where everybody had a personality and was still doing their own thing and everything else. And my fourth one was with my soul family. So I was just curious on your distinction of that. And if, I've never heard you talk about it. And I was just curious as to me, that's the same thing as people who say I have these guides, you still have to use the discernment, because I tell people I might guide a lower version of me. I mean, not lower, but you know what I mean? This is my understanding at this point, but it's not now. I mean, I've even heard some people say that, or messages I've gotten, channeling and whatever, Jesus is the same way. That's my understanding then, I've expanded, a little bit in how people perceive it anyway. So I was just curious on those two things.
And that's what Jehovah is saying. He's grown.
Yeah.
He's grown since he did the Bible.
Yes, exactly. And that's and that's the message I got, that that was then, that's where I was then. So I just wanted any clarification you had on that.
And by the way, one place, so a lot in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they call the place that you were asking about the Bardo. And that's where they say we go. And
and that's interesting.
Do you know much about the Bardo, Kevin?
I don't know. No, I was a Tibet. Look, I have lifetimes as a Tibetan Buddhist monk, and I have 3 or 4 lifetimes as Buddhist monks. One was in Tibet, but I don't remember all that stuff.
That's a good question, real quick, because in my husband's experience, he was told the Tibetan scrolls were the closest thing to how things are than any doctrine we have here per se. And I don't know what they meant by that, but I'm just saying that, I mean, compared to lots of other texts, so I'm curious. But
My
anyway,
experience is there's a whole lot of difference on the other side. And that when you hear anybody say, this is the way it is, there's always going to be something else that's not the way that is. And so to your point, you said like there's a whole bunch of this and there's that. I think there is a this and a that. And then so that kind of summary answers that part of your question. If you want to ask some questions, that's okay. But also about like guides and so forth, you mentioned, yeah, I tell people, look, you on this side, it's no different. You're going to listen to your dry cleaner, sometimes may have really good advice, about not dry cleaning. It could have really good advice about, geez, I got this, I'm just making this up. I got this like thumb drive for my computer and it does this and this, and it's like amazing. And it's like personal. I said, wow, really? And then, you get a dry cleaner. But then you go to somebody else, you go to a car mechanic and he may give you lousy advice about the car. And he's supposed to be the car mechanic expert guy. It's no different on the other side. So it's always filter.
kind of like trusting Amazon reviews.
You always have to be like, and people don't like to hear that because people like to think that, oh, I can just relax and just be spoon fed. It's like, no, when is that ever a good idea? I mean, really.
So do you feel like even if these messages, like even if what they gave you on the other side, like my understanding was always whether you believed it, your choice, whatever free will choice it was still as it should be. It still took you where you needed to go.
No, that implies determinism, predetermined. That implies destiny. So free will, people got to understand. So I have several essays in here, and I have a chart on one of the pages in here, and which I can't find real quick probably. But anyway, it's free will. Oh, there it is. The practical benefits of free will and practical problems of determinism. The practical benefits of free will and the practical problems of determinism. So on page 213, if anybody has the book. So I'm not going to read all of them, but it's a table, and I list about, I don't know how many that is, 15 or 20 or something, different benefits of free will and the problems with determinism. So benefits of free will, we can work it out. That's the Beatles refrain. We can work it out. Problems of determinism is we're stuck. We're stuck. That's what it means. And people don't think of it that way, but that's what it means. Benefits of free will, lots of possibilities. Problem of determinism, limited options. Benefits of free will, freedom. What comes with determinism? You're trapped. Right? It's already figured out. That's what people, they don't, woe is me, give up, abandonment, life is a struggle. What's the point? Those are all the problems with passivity instead of being proactive. No choices instead of choices. Everything is already set in stone. That's what determinism means. Okay.
Oh, I don't believe that.
That's when you start saying those phrases. That's what it means. Now you may think, oh, it only means it in this situation. That's still free will. It's not determinism. People don't understand. Destiny, determinism are absolute terms, and you have to use the English properly. You cannot use, well, I love you, I love you, I love you, meaning I love you without any exceptions, and then you give an exception. That's not love. Okay?
Yes, right? I love you as you are and where you're at.
You can't change the definition to suit what you're saying. So it's the same thing with determinism and destiny, and that was meant to be. So people use that was meant to be as a phrase to make people feel good, but it's really a source of suffering. It's inaccurate. It means everything is meant to be. That means the kid who died, that baby at 1 year old of a horrific brain cancer, was born with it. That was meant to happen to your baby. Sorry. No. That's what meant to be. Meant to be is there's no exceptions. You can't have an exception. Well, it wasn't meant to be in the baby situation, but in that guy who murdered that person, and then they came around and they got him and he was murdered. That was meant to be. No, meant to be is absolute. You cannot pick and cherry pick meant to be. Okay.
I get you.
Gotta be
And a lot
careful.
of narcissists like to use that for like, the devil made me do it. They
Oh,
rather
yes.
than take any responsibility. Well, the devil won.
Yes, that's I use that.
Blaming external beings is a huge issue. Yes.
Yes, I use that example that you just said, Shaun, when I talk about karma and how the notion of karma as consequences was fine when they first raised it 10,000 years ago. And then it become, no, you get this mountain of karma and you get this bad karma and good karma, and it's an accounting system, credits and debits. And, and now you have so much bad karma, you're screwed and all this stuff. And people like narcissists will use karma in the exact same way you just said. They'll say,
Yeah, I just experienced it a few nights ago,
yeah,
literally.
it was your karma,
With a
Shaun.
person saying the devil made me do it.
Yes, I was mean to you because it was your karma, Shaun. I have no responsibility in that. It was you doing it. I was just a messenger to you, Shaun. That's like completely screwed up. All right, let's call a spade a spade. But you see that in spiritual circles all the time. It's cognitively dissonant. They're inconsistent. They cherry pick these concepts. You cannot do that with some of the concepts like free will and determinism. Okay.
Okay, so I really do have this question. So all the members of the movement, do they agree on everything?
No. No. And George even says it in the 3rd November talk. They don't agree on everything. Like some of the key members do. Jehovah, Shankara, Maharishi is John the Baptist now. It took him a little while to give up the guru thing because he liked the guru thing. All right. He was just with the guru in the guru thing recently. All right. He's come around on that. Who did I leave out? Maharishi's teacher, who was the guru before Maharishi, actually was one of the persuaders of Maharishi on the other side to give up the guru thing and to be more behind the no more guru thing, right? It didn't take him a lot, but he did it. Maharishi is so like emotionally, it's very emotionally attractive for people to worship you.
And that's another reason why to use discernment. Because if the members of the movement even don't completely agree,
Yeah.
then if you have a near-death experience and
Yes.
you meet one of them, you can't take it as absolute truth. You've got to still see, does this resonate with me?
Thank you. Thank you for saying that and seeing that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because I know that near-death experiencers can sometimes be really, well, they've got their story of what they experienced.
Yeah.
And you're not going to change it, like literally. And that's kind of what I've said. It's like you change one story for a new story.
And the thing is about that though, Shaun, is that they may never, or not never, they may take a very, very long time, many lifetimes for them to get the understanding that in fact, what you understand now to be the case is the case, and you can't force them. And especially if they've had a very powerful NDE with a very powerful being on the other side who they think is God or Jesus or whoever the person really is, doesn't really matter. It's a very powerful being to them, and they're going to interpret it however they do. You can't change that. So you have to let them be. You embrace them.
Right.
We can if they're open to hearing ideas, we can plant little seeds, but we have to leave them alone. Look, there's a ton of people in Maharishi's organization who did not go to this event, and he visited many of them, and they did not because they were fearful of being excommunicated from the organization. Now, I'm just telling you that because when you watch the talk, now you'll understand why George is saying some of the stuff that he's saying, because he's talking about, well, some of you were afraid to come, so you're just watching the live stream now, but understand that it's okay that you're not here, and Maharishi understands, and Jehovah understands, and Gurudev understands why you're not here, and so forth. He says stuff like that. If you don't understand the background of what I just said, because George doesn't get into that. He doesn't want to get into the excommunication threats and the politics of it. Now you'll understand why he's saying that kind of stuff. For a lot of people, just go over their head, or you'll go, huh? What's he talking about? Now you'll know. Okay.
Can I ask you something? Do you believe a lot of it, like some of what I say is that everything's like a mind construct.
What do you mean by
Like,
that?
well, like the creation of the mind, like there's a conscious energy and everything else is the
Are you
creation.
saying MIND? Is that what you're saying?
Well, mhm.
You're saying-
Oh, well, like even NDEs, like isn't everything like
Yeah,
a
she said mind.
creation? Yeah.
Okay, so is everything a mind construct? No, I mean, this, I'm not creating this laptop or this, I'm not constructing the notion that I'm on a Zoom call. There's an objectivity to reality as well. This is the dualism, non-dualism thing, which I also have an essay in this book about dualism, non-dualism, and they just very briefly alluded to it. Again, George ran out of time. To be honest, he ran out of time. He didn't have time to cover all the stuff that he ended up having a stack of notes. I used to go visit him over those 10 months in San Francisco. He started out like the 90 minutes started out like this much notes, because George has a photographic memory, so he literally can remember stuff and he wrote it down. But eventually it was like this thick, the notes. I'm not joking. Packed 8.5 by 11 handwritten stuff. And so he didn't get rid of, he couldn't communicate everything that they said, but those were some of the other ideas that were there, right? Yeah, dualism, non-dualism. No, dualism exists. This whole idea that merging and non-dualism, it's a misinterpretation of a genuine experience that many of you probably have had too. I've had it thousands of times where I feel incredibly connected. I've been meditating for 52 years. I've estimated I've meditated somewhere around 40,000 times. So I've had this experience probably thousands of times where I feel incredibly connected with everything in the universe and animate, inanimate objects, doesn't matter what. But that's not merging. Merging means you lose your individuality. You don't know who you are. It's like you don't exist anymore as an individual mind. So people will talk about it and they'll say, well, but the medium said, when we die, we merge. Well, who are you talking to on the other side? You can't talk to cosmic soup. If you're merging, then everything's cosmic soup. What are you talking to the medium's talking to cosmic soup? It makes no logical sense, except you hear people say that all the time. And even mediums will say that, okay? Makes absolutely no sense. Okay, you're talking to cosmic soup then, No.
Ram Dass has talked about that as well, actually, that same thing.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah.
Oh, so
Are there questions in the chat box? I see some stuff popping up, but I can't read them. Do you see them, Shaun?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I checked for them. I think I've asked or had Shaun ask everyone that came out. The rest is just either comments or people having to go and saying goodnight and thanking you for your time.
Yeah, I'm not reading them. I'm just seeing flash of them.
yeah, so I think we've covered most everything, unless anybody has any final questions. Laura, do you have a final question or?
Yeah,
Oh, I always have questions.
I knew that you did. I was sitting there watching you just like.
No.
Oh,
Laura's sitting there like this. Laura's sitting there like this going.
Right.
We can see the wheels spinning and the smoke coming out.
It's like steam's coming out of my ears. No, like there's a couple things that that I have wanted desperately since I came back. And the last thing that I was told was that I could come back whenever I wanted to. And I knew that meant through meditation. And when I understood the gravity of everything that happened, and really what that meant going back, I just thought to myself, if I can tap into that.
Going back to the other side, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. If I can tap into that kind of energy and bring it into my life, I could literally do anything. But it's like, how do I mean, I shouldn't be like, I've already seen miracles like that are just not possible. But it's just like, I want to know how to get back. I want to hear my guides. It's like, I just want everything right now. So if you could tell me It's like there's so many bits and pieces that I've heard that I've wanted to ask questions on. Like,
Yeah.
I gotta read your book. I think that's
Yeah.
the bottom
Yeah,
line.
Yeah, the pink one, by the way, is a great gift for people. It really is. I think it's a great gift to give to people.
Yeah, yeah. And the way I suggest that you read this book is you go to the table of contents and you look at one of the 67 essays and you look at the title and you go, oh, that's the one I'm going to read now.
That's what makes it cool, I
Ah.
think.
Yeah, because it's like transcending cruelty. Can you sprint your way to happiness? Love is not a feeling. Crying is not weakness. Ego, balance, grieving, self-interest versus self-centered. You just look at the title. Effortlessness, revisited, the meaning of life, free will defined, 10 spiritual red flags, spiritual materialism revisited, unbundling enlightenment.
The spiritual materialism is very good.
Yeah. Destiny and losing a child. I help a lot of people with that. God, ego and God, pettiness, fear and punishment. So you just look at the titles and you go, oh, I want to read that one. And they're a page and a half long. Or, the longer, most of them are about 2 or 3 pages. And that's 2 or 3 pages in here. You know what I mean? That's 2 or 3 of these pages. It's not long. So, and then some, there's about a half a dozen that are about 6 or 8 pages long, but even those are, but so you just read the title and go, boom. But here's the thing to you about your desire, Laura. Anybody you don't have to have an NDE. I go back and forth and so forth, experience whatever, at different times, and I get communications and this and that. It's very normal. They talk about piercing the veil or the veil between this side and that side, so forth. It's that the veil is very thin for me, but I choose to be here in physical reality. I don't choose to hang out on the other side a lot, although I could. But to your point about meditation, am I kind of hanging out on the other side a lot during meditation? Shaun knows me because of my meditation class and stuff. Yeah, I am. Okay. But that's because I'm helping people to learn how to do it themselves. And I meditate with you guys all the time. So am I spending lots of time on the other side through that? Like you're kind of guessing, Laura, is that would be, yes. But I choose to be more invested in my physical lifetime because I choose to be here. I want to be here. I like being in. I go swimming. I like the pump. I like the physical nature of going out power walking and sweating and so forth. I mean, to me, I miss that when I'm on the other side. I miss all that.
And also Kelvin used to do mediumship. He did that for a while, and he chose not to, right?
I chose not to. I did it for when I started opening up spontaneously in 1986. I didn't even believe this stuff, and I was always like, "This download is." I'm like, "Where is this? Am I making this stuff up?" I went through an identity crisis for about a year and a half. I thought, "Oh, am I making this up? Am I too many Star Trek movies?" And then I went to a bookstore once, and I pulled a random book off a shelf, and I started reading stuff that I had channeled. Like, what? Where does it go? What? This is like, it's like, what? What's this? Page 38 of some book I wasn't even looking for. I just went boop. Anyway, so so I did readings. I was charging people, nominal fee back then in 1986. But then I realized that even though I kept telling people, look, you got to figure stuff out yourself. I've always been saying that for thousands of years to people. They would keep coming back to me. And so, it's like, you're not listening. You're not listening. I told you go figure this out. No. And they keep coming back and they would pay me, but I'm like, no, I don't want to. I was enabling this dysfunction is the way I languaged it much later. And so I just stopped doing it after about 6 or 8 months. I just said no. And then I started teaching workshops on people how to open up themselves. So I figured I'm not going to do readings anymore, but I'll teach them how to do it themselves with themselves, kind of a thing. But now I teach meditation and I teach afterlife classes, and I just kind of more focused in what I'm doing. And now people can, many of my students, some of them come and they just want to open up more. And so I teach them in the way that I teach the meditation, and it helps open them up more. So, so I'm more a, what's the word? I'm more a teach people how to fish person, I was like bringing home loads of fish and giving people fish, and a lot of times I was giving away the fish. They're not even charging them for the fish. but it's like, they're still coming to me for fish. I teach people how to fish, you know?
Isn't it true that like I know there's so much focus on healing and us healing other people, and like what you just said about teaching to fish, like I don't feel, and I don't know if I would ever want to like call myself a healer when like only the person themselves can heal themselves.
I
Like
don't, I'm not, I don't, people call me a healer. I don't call myself a healer. I tell people, I teach them how to heal themselves. I don't even use the word heal. I just teach, tell people, I teach them how to improve the quality of their life. I teach them tools, and I teach them how to access what's already in them. Even the meditation technique, as I teach it, as Shaun's taken my class, and you know, you've heard me say this. You know, I tell people, they thank me, and I appreciate the thanks. They thank me for teaching them, and I say, look, I appreciate the thanks. That said, you need to own the fact that what I've taught you is simply stimulating something in yourself that's already always existed in you since before birth, that you've forgotten how to access. I'm taught you a tool that reminds you how to access what's always been there. That's what I'm doing, right? So if you want to call that healing, you can call it healing, but I just call it reminding, because we have largely forgotten. That's what I'm a reminder. I'm a reminder. I'm a seed planter. That's what I do. And if the seed grows, it's great. And I never persuade people to take my classes. I tell people to go think about it, and then you contact me, you come back and whatever. I'm the opposite of how I used to sell, Shaun, back in my old sales days in corporate America. It's like, I mean, I did do consultative sales, you know, as you and I were taught to do. But I was a little bit more pushy back then. I am completely the opposite now. Opposite.
And the other thing for everybody to know is that he has a sliding scale. So
oh yeah,
nobody's turned away if you
Nobody.
can't afford it. Lots of NDErs, you know, don't have money or whatever. Nobody's turned away. That's why he has 2 nonprofits.
Yep. Nobody has
And-
ever turned away for financial reasons. I'll turn people away for other reasons.
Right.
Like if somebody comes to me and says, hey, somebody told me I should really take your class. And I say, well, what do you think? What do you want? What do you need to do? And I'll check and see if they really want to do it or not. And if they really don't, I'll tell them, you know, you got to go think about this. You know, I'm going to teach you because you want to. You got to be at least curious. If you're doing it because somebody else, your husband, your wife, your mom, your dad said you got to do it. I tell mothers and fathers this if they tell me, oh, I get to teach my children. I say, yeah, let's talk to the kids about that first. We'll see if the kids want to do this, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think
You
we have.
You got everything covered?
Oh, there's going to be so many more questions. So yeah,
Well,
that's your homework.
that's the
Laura,
other-
watch the talk.
Yeah.
You know,
Watch the talk.
come with more questions than on the 30th.
And then
I always have a notebook.
Yeah. Watch the talk that George gives. It's 3 hours long, plus there's a 45-minute Q&A afterwards. We took a break because we knew it was going to go a couple hours at least. So we had people come middle of the day so people could fly in that morning or just drive in locally to try to make it cost effective for people. We did it on Thanksgiving weekend on, I think it was a Saturday, I think it was a Sunday. It was on a Sunday. And we did it and we had food for people. So my point of saying this is between the three hour and the 45-minute, people went and we had, you know, some catered sandwiches to people to eat and whatever, so they could refuel and come back, because we knew people would be burning up the calories. Listen to this material, man. They're like, you talk about steam coming out of the top of your, out of your ears, Laura. Oh my God. It's like, and the room was, I can say this to you guys. I don't normally say this to a public group. The room was full. There were thousands of light beings in the room. Everybody in the, I'm getting a little emotional saying this. Everybody in the movement was there, of course. And then there were thousands of light beings there. The energy in the room was like, whoa. My daughter sat in you'll see me in the audience, my daughter and my son and daughter sitting on either side of me. And she started tearing up right at the beginning as soon as George started talking. It didn't even matter what he was talking about. She just felt all the, yeah.
Did anybody take pictures like of orbs?
Orbs.
kinda-
I don't know if anybody did, but people talked about it. Yeah,
That would be really cool.
I know. Yeah.
Well, Kelvin, thank you.
Great.
I can't believe we've 3 hours.
Oh my God! Look, my low battery light even just came up. You know, like it was fully charged when we started. Oh my God! Anyway,
Yeah, people. So sorry, everybody, but it was great. It was a great conversation.
yeah.
You know.
Thanks for organizing this, Shaun. You do an incredible job as usual. So really appreciate it. Yeah.
My pleasure, and thank you, Lorelei, for helping me. And thank you,
Lorelei,
all of you.
All the questions, Laura and everybody, and Kathy and everybody whose name I can't remember, and who asked the questions was really awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah, lots of great questions. So
yeah. So watch the 30th November talk. It's at 30thnovember.com. And then on my website, kelvinchin.org, is the link to that we're going to use in next week on 30th November for the Q&A that I'm going to do. It's going to be open to the public worldwide, live, and it's going to be facilitated by Brian Smith. Those of you may know Brian, who is, he has his own podcast called Grief to Growth. Brian's also one of my students and so forth. So Brian's going to facilitate that next week, 30th November, right? At 12 o'clock Pacific time, on Pacific time, 10 o'clock Hawaii time, 10 in the morning, and then 3 o'clock, Eastern time, and what's that, 8 o'clock in the evening in London and so forth.
and we'll put it in the Hawaiian Islands and all the other Facebook groups. So everybody will know about it.
Yeah. Right. So you'll have the link there. Good.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
Have a great.
Thank you so much.
Good.
Have a great night, everyone.
Oh, one thing, Shaun. So
Yeah.
part of my nonprofit is people can contact me and have a free phone conversation with me, free, no charge. Free means no charge, right? Free 1 hour phone conversation with me about anything that I teach you, talk about, whatever. People just go to my website, kelvinchin.org, go to the contact page, send me an email, say, hey, I want to schedule, blah, blah, blah. There you go. Okay.
Awesome. Perfect.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kelvin.
Yeah.
Have a
Yeah.
great night, y'all. Talk to you soon.
So, yeah, thanks.